we are. Couldn't have asked for a better backdrop.
I try.
We're in. I mean, what do we consider? Is this like West Central Oregon area?
Yeah, probably.
Region. Super green. Got a little bit of rain last night. It's gorgeous up here, man. Sitting up here with Joe Dawson. Joe, welcome back to the Iron Sights Podcast, my dude.
Happy to be back.
So am I. Thanks for having us. It's a gorgeous day. People might not recognize you from the last time you were on. You've done nicely growing the facial hair back in, man.
Oh yeah, everybody tries to give me shit for shaving, and then I go like, "Hey man, just give it 8 weeks, I'll be back." Yeah,
the joke was when you walked into the hotel room at to where we recorded the first one in Las Vegas. I was like, "Wait, who's that?" Like, I didn't recognize you because you'd shaved the beard off. So here we are. We're back in. It's like, I think it's fitting for the environment that we're in. But
rustic. It's a rustic environment.
When you left the last time after you kind of walked out of the room, and SHOT Show was a blur, but then I got to listen back to the podcast, and I was very inspired to go train with you. So recently, for those people that listen to that podcast, I talked in depth about the 4 days that I spent with you out in Reno doing scope carbine and PRS stuff with the bolt guns. And from there, I got to talk with you more, just kind of being on scene for those 4 days. And I feel like I have unfinished business with Joe. I think there's a lot more, that we could dig into. And part of that is just all the depth that you provide from a social media perspective, all the depth of knowledge that I got from you in those 4 days, but that you're constantly putting that stuff out there. And there's so many questions that people ask on a regular basis. I thought maybe we could handle some of those things and give people more perspective in a longer format and maybe a different venue. So hence the circling back to do this again. So again, thanks for humoring me on this.
Oh, 100%.
And obliging me.
Yeah.
And for the smokes. So, just kind of I was hoping today we could get into, there's a few things on my mind. I think there's some culture stuff, like gun culture stuff. I think there's some technical stuff that we could get into part of it is going down the PRS / scope carbine path and some of the things that have come up. And I think there's some current events that have come up that actually influence that conversation a little bit. So I'm just going to jump right into it. And maybe even with the current events piece, I don't own a LPBO. I still don't. I'm going to very soon here after I kind of left class. Left the course, I went back and okay, how am I going to do this build? Like, how am I going to put together my things? So we're talking about builds. Like, what am I building here? Is this an SPR? Is this a DMR? Is this what barrel length should I go to and all that stuff? So I want to jump right in kind of with some of that, but specific with regard to all the talk around the LPVOs with one of the recent school shootings that everybody's probably very familiar with out in, I believe it was Tennessee. And there was an officer, there's body cam footage using an LPVO. And what are the questions that you're getting about those right now as a guy who answers technical questions about all things firearms? So
LPVOs aren't a new thing. They just, everything, trends are very cyclical, and we come back to things. And, we get bored with one thing because everybody on Instagram's done it for the last, 6 months. So now the next thing is just, one event away, whether that is somebody making a YouTube video, an event happening that drives, something like that, which is a tactical requirement, whatever. That event happened, and there's a line in the video where they say basically push the LPVO, and then everybody who's been looking to justify why they need to run one then goes, look,
has their justification.
But the thing is, for those who actually watch the video and understand what the hell they're watching, the shot's actually taken with the offset acro, which is what's funny.
Yeah, so that was funny, and I didn't pick that up until a couple times in.
And so because they say it, and then there's a lot of people who are like trying to justify a purchase, or especially within different departments, it's a justification piece, right? Like, well, now we have this event that then gives me the grounds to then justify, because law enforcement departments, all these things end up being really slow to change what their written doctrine is, policy to run,
training,
whatever.
All of this stuff.
And so I'm actually all for people using that event to do whatever, but it's understanding your requirements that then drive it. And I had this long conversation with my buddy Chris Palmer, who's out of Arizona, who's a big instructor and law enforcement officer down there. And yesterday, actually, driving back, about I've been asked to develop these LPBO instructor courses for law enforcement. And the way I view scoped carbine courses and that application, I think, is very different than what a lot of law enforcement, at least in the conversations that I've had, are looking to get out of it. And so they go, well, hey, we won't take a shot farther than 200 yards. But we want to use an LPBO. So the conversation then becomes, well, then what are you putting an LPBO on? Well, it's for identification. It's for looking inside of a building. If you are staged outside of in the light and the house is really dark, with a red dot, like the open door might look completely dark. But if you throw some magnification on it, now you can see everything inside the room. And so there's use there for the magnification. Mm-hmm. But you're not utilizing is the reticle, and you're not utilizing the other things that those types of optics and things give you, like we did in Reno. And so then I go, well, then why aren't you using a magnifier? And LPVOs bring all kinds of other setup requirements, being able to understand how you level a reticle, how you mount and torque, watch your torque specs, are you going to run a backup dot or not? Like setting up your ocular focus and, adjusting that for each shooter. Like there's a lot more involved with LPVO and getting into scoped rifles than there is with necessarily a red dot and a magnifier, which also has its own set of requirements. It still has an ocular focus. It still has to be collimated with the red dot. But if you're just looking for magnification and the ability to scale up and down magnification, the simplicity is greatly higher, or much higher, with a magnifier setup than with an LPBO. But again, we find this thing where guys are looking for the question to ask to get the answer they want. They're not looking at what question they're actually asking. And so LPVOs are one of those things. And then now it comes into like, now they're making a 2 to 10. Now, should I run an LPVO like a 1 to 8 or a 1 to 10 versus a 4 to 16, a 3 to 18, or whatever? I mean, it's the never ending debate on the Q&As I get over the application, because everybody's going to be slightly different. And we've gone down that, you and I in other conversations as well.
Yeah, it's I find it obviously for somebody like me that's sort of new to it, and I think a lot of people that listen to the show are kind of on the fringes. I mean, there's all different. The people that I talk to that give me feedback, they're at any level, and there's factions within each level of where people side or where they don't side on certain things, but it can get super overwhelming, and it just like I don't understand like why would this be better versus not, but they see these trends happening, and you're going to see a lot of LPVOs sold because of this. That's frustrating for me because from the get-go I've been like, I want to make sure that I don't need all the things. If I had to have a couple of things, what would I need and why would I want them? Where do I go to get this information? And that's where things get the waters get really muddy.
And that's, I think a lot of people are scared to spend money twice.
I am.
But what happens is like, I think we talked about this last time, which is borrowing other people's whys.
You have to, yeah.
If you don't know the questions to ask, you're just going, well, that person knows more than me, so I'm going to ask the same question he's asking. But that might not fit your requirements or your need. And so why everybody asks me questions on like the Instagram or whatever, and I always respond with more questions 99% of the time. And people go like, well, but pretty quickly I can pick up that they're asking the question in ways until I give them the answer they want. They're not actually looking, and they slightly get frustrated when I ask them more questions because the answer, they can see the answer they want me to give them.
You're getting further away. Yeah.
And they're like, no, come back to me. And I go, but hey man, like if you live, and cause that's Chris and I were talking about it, he goes, the use case of more distance applies everywhere. Like New York has Central Park. Like, so there's always cases where you can say, well, I could shoot farther. And there's the likelihood of what is your most likely contact distance. Or if you're using this for a coyote rifle, if you're using this for, ride in the back of your ATV because you own a ranch in Wyoming, whatever it is, what distances are you typically seeing? And then building a platform that then does what you want it to at those distances. And so I get asked all the time about like magnification requirements. And this is actually quasi, I had a range that I like to give out, but Alex at Ridgeline actually uses this. And he always said it's usually double the distance you want to shoot. And so
okay,
I kind of reduce it down to like 1.5 to 2 times the distance you want to shoot. So if you want to shoot 500 yards, you probably want to start around 7 to 10 power. If you want to shoot 1,000 yards, you probably want to be around 15 to 20 power.
Okay.
That's just a good starting point. Now people go like, well, but I shoot out to 1,000 with a 6 or 8 power. Like, yes, you can, but to be in that efficient range of magnification for that distance, I think those are good rules of thumb.
That's the advice. Yeah.
Because it's kind of like we were talking about bullet selection, right? Like I could throw a 6 to 36 on a 10.5 inch gun and I have all the magnification, but there's other things that play into this: weight, size, parallax adjustment, what are you using or what are you not using of that setup for your given application? And so it's, what are you trying to build the gun for? And then finding the thing that fits closest within the bell curve of your use, because you can what if either side of any spectrum.
Sure.
Well, what if I'm only carrying my 8.5 300 black and I have to take a shot at 700 yards? It's like, dude, that's a bad day for you, man.
Yeah.
Or it's like, what if I have a 338 Norma and I have to take a shot at 36 yards? You're like, dude, look over the top of the turret and pull the trigger. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
And so it's, people want to play the but what if? And I'm like, dude, I'm looking for the 80% solution. I'm washing off the 10% on this side and I'm taking off the 10% on this side. I'm trying to get you into what does the 80% of what you're asking as good as I possibly can, or as well as you possibly can.
I think that's where the things get really cloudy, because people start concocting things, and you can go down the what if, rabbit hole. Anybody can take that to whatever degree that they want, and they're making all their decisions on the what ifs. So, and let's be honest, a lot of why people get into the firearms world is for self-protection, right? Security, and all of those things. And then it can get wildly, kind of over here or wildly over there, depending on but I also work law enforcement, or I live in the city, or, I'm in my vehicle all day long, so I have to make these different choices. But basically, every purchase you make is almost a what if. So if you don't have any experience around that, you're going back to getting somebody else's why. You're going off somebody else's what if. The question hasn't been developed well.
I compare it to physical fitness, which is an analogy that I know you'll understand well. It's like, yes, what if my wife's trapped underneath a flipped car and I have to try to flip it off of her? I should be really good at deadlifts, right? What if I'm being chased by a tiger for 6 miles? You can what if anything. Okay, how about you work in a cubicle and you just want to be better, well-rounded, for your 80%, right? Like, we're going to wash off those what ifs, the 1 in a million chance. But then people go like, well, then why are you carrying a gun for that 1 in a million chance? Yep. And
that's exactly where I was just going to go.
And and I just put this on socials the other day, and I view it as physical fitness is something that's constantly carried with you. You can't go back to your truck and get it. You can't leave it at home. And that's the whole thing. What I see physical fitness in our industry is people want to wear plate carriers and gas masks and whatever. And it's like, dude, if you go run with wearing PT shorts and shoes, that aerobic conditioning doesn't go away when you put on plate carriers and no, you've increased your capacity for work,
right? Whatever.
A gun is a attriment, right? Like you are bringing it with you. It's an additional capability. I think violence is a force equation. It's a mathematical equation. And if you are not a criminal or somebody who's, violent, you are behind the power curve already because somebody else has started the equation. And so the only way to have a say in the outcome of that equation is to carry or have the capacity for equal or greater force. And so that's why I think firearms are such a great equalizer, as we were talking about last night, which is because it doesn't matter that you and I are 6 foot plus, 200 plus pound guys. The same force can be carried by our wives who are significantly smaller women, or instead of, if they go up against somebody, they can bring as much force to bear as that person can or more. Or if that person brings a knife, now our 105 pound spouse now can bring greater force to have a say in that outcome. And so I think the analogy carries as far as finding the reason why, but nobody leaves in the morning. Everybody leaves in the morning going, I want to be healthier today, have better mental capacity, whatever. Nobody leaves going, I want to be in a fight. I want to be in a firefight. I want to be in a fist fight. I want to get mugged at the corner store until it does. And you don't have a say if you don't carry the ability to protect yourself. And so that force equation, and you go, well, there's police. That's having a say after the equation's already happened.
Yeah, you're also farming out your safety to somebody else. You're relying on somebody else. I was having that conversation with David Acosta the other day. Yeah, like I think what he was saying is all the victims he's ever dealt with, or nearly all of them, had farmed out or basically expected somebody else to be there or do the thing for them from a safety perspective
to circle back
health perspective.
To the question we were asking is it takes personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing with not having the right why is it takes responsibility to look internally, or look at your life, look at your application, look at how you are going down this path of protection, gun purchases, whatever, and actually write your own questions, write your own requirements. And, we got into the SPR, DMR thing. All that is the military set a list of requirements, and there was a contract put out for acquisition. Companies provided a gun, and then that platform or that contract was then called the Navy is looking for a DMR. The Army is looking for a SPR. And those acronyms are like CQB or like it used to be, it was MOUNT, which is Mobile Operations in Urban Terrain. And then it was SOUC. It was Special Operations Urban Combat. And then it was like, but it meant the same thing. It was just who wrote the acronym
to fit the contract. Or the policy or the whatever.
Yeah. And so all the SPR, DMR, Mark 12, recce gun, whatever, it's all that is they were all tied to a contract that then is then put out there. Because people ask me, they go, what's the difference? I go, dude, you're taking a contract like acronym and trying to apply it to, or a job or skill set, and trying to apply it to this cookie cutter gun. It's like, no, that was a requirement that was set. You have to set your own requirement. Otherwise, you're just stealing a requirement that was set by Green Berets in Afghanistan in 2008, or NSW in 2004 in Iraq. Like we wrote out like, hey, we were doing these types of operations within these cities, and we needed this type of gun to shoot.
At this time, right?
And so we want this capability. Industry, give it to us. Well, dude, you're your own contracting, body. Like you write your own requirements, and that's the thing is it takes personal responsibility to go, hey, what do I need my gun to actually do? Or what do I want it to do? I mean, need and want are very different things. And like, do you need night vision or do you want night vision? You're setting the need for possible scenarios, the level of training you want to do, whatever. And so it's, and I'm going to get lit up for that. Somebody's going to be like, Joe says you don't need night vision.
I didn't hear you say that. It's like, do you need it versus do you want it?
Yes.
You have to answer that question,
100%.
Question yourself. Like,
and then, people go like, we go down the rabbit hole of like, I watch this. You were talking about questions I get all the time. Mm-hmm. It's like, I have a 12.5. Should I get a 14.5?
Yeah, I love this. That was part of my questions. Yeah.
I have a 14.5. Should I get a 16? I have a 16. Should I get a 14.5? How much of a difference does it make? What's your requirement? Because we shot 14.5s to distances that people on the internet would say are impossible. And yet that steel wasn't very happy about it. But the 16 or 18 inch guns did it better. But then if we were to take those same guns and try to do CQB, like you're going to
give something up.
You're going to give something up. And so, and they go, well, I want to build one. And it's like, well, then you're going to do everything okay. And you're going to do nothing great. And so then, we get into the role of like, that's why, like, as a SEAL, we had a suite of guns. I didn't have one gun. Like, and that's
you choose the right gun for the job for the day or for the couple of days or whatever.
Marines are given M16s. Like, dude, I had.
That's what they get.
That's it.
You do everything with this.
Maybe. Yeah. Like, I had a SIG 226 at one, and a HK45C at one point. Plus, I had access to MP5s. Plus, I had a 10.5 Mark 18 plus a 14 5-inch gun. Then I had a 16-inch SCAR, but I also had a 13-inch barrel. Plus, as a sniper, I had a 20-inch SCAR plus a 300 Win Mag plus a 50 cal. And at one point, we still had the EBRs, so the M1As still in inventory. So like I had, and plus our breacher shotguns and everything else, plus belt feds. So like, dude, I got to choose based off my use what gun I was grabbing out of the safe. And those are just, and most of those are long guns. So the application for a belt fed is very different than the application for my 300 Win Mag.
Right.
But they're both considered rifles. So the application for my 10.5 CQBR is very different than the application for a Mark 12, which is an 18 5-inch gun. But they are both AR-15s. They're both shooting 5.56. They both like have the ergonomics are very similar, but you're giving something up with both of them. And again, I've watched people shoot 10.5s to 500 yards, and I've watched people make, floating buoys in the water dance at 800 with a Mark 12. It comes down to just because you can doesn't mean you should. But if that's what you have when you're asked to do it, knowing that you can if you have to. And so that's the trade-off in equipment choices.
Yeah, and I guess that's the basis for a lot of the questions that you likely get as the subject matter expert or whatever that somebody's looking to you as to provide insight to what should I get? Or, should I get a 14.5 versus a 16? Or, what's better? You actually gave me I think it was a really quick checklist. I was kind of asking you those questions myself. There was a quick checklist of, you need to ask yourself these 3 questions before you ask somebody else the question. Like, what do you need it for? How far do you need it to go? And what do you need it to do when it gets to the other end?
And so,
I forget what those were.
So basically, people ask me about bullet choice or round choice because like AR-15, AR-10, do I need a bolt action? Do I want a a short action, a long action? What should I buy? Like, because it's like buying a car, right? Should I get a Honda Civic, a Chevy Silverado, or a Ferrari? Mm-hmm. It's like, so what I tell people is I go, how big of a bullet do you want to shoot? How far do you want it to go? And what do you want it to do when it gets there? Because people ask me this because they go, and there's other things like barrel life, ammo availability, cost of ammo, that all plays into these things too, of choices. Because like, 6-arc. 6-arc's this big thing that everybody's been pushing for AR-15s because ballistically it does better than a 5.56, but it needs a different bolt, a different magazine. The ammo's expensive. It's like $1.50, $1.70 a round. Like, whereas 5.56 is 50 cents. Or, for 77 grain, it's $1. Like 79 cents to just over $1 for, Black Hills. So those things play a role. Yes, if all things are equal, if you're in a military unit and the government's giving you pallets of ammo, 6-arc does kick the shit out of 5.56. So did 6.8 SPC. So did 6.5 Grendel. So does 224 Valkyrie. It's just the newest thing. And so again, you have to ask yourself all these questions to identify. And I tell people, I go, okay, you're going to go build a 12.5 6-arc. That's great. Are you going to go shoot your carbine drills on the range where you burn 400 rounds a day? You just shot $600 in ammunition.
Yep.
In one day.
What does that mean for your training time?
Versus $150.
Right. Yeah. How often are you going to go out and go through $600 worth of ammunition just to be trained on that firearm that you decided to purchase?
And you've now seen inside my safe, it's like, going
it's
and
impressive, by the way. I'm not going to get over that. I've been ruined.
Going out to train bolt actions, like I go teach, and they go, "Why don't you bring your 6.5 Creedmoor, your 6.5 SOM, your this?" I go, because for what I'm asking my gun to do, dude, I bring my 308s, or I have a 223 trainer that shoots 77 grain in little tiny groups, and I can shoot 70-cent ammo instead of $1.20, and I can still hit the size targets I'm asking to shoot. The barrel life's longer. I don't have to worry about it as much. Like 5.56 is going to get 8,000 or 10,000 round barrel life if you run it hard as shit. Like whereas 6.5 Creedmoor is like 2,800 rounds, like maybe depending on how hard you run it. So 308, 6,000 to 10,000 rounds depending on how hard you run the barrel. So like 6 Creedmoor is like 2,000, 2,500 rounds on a barrel.
That's a thing.
Yeah. And so on top of ammo availability, now, do I think barrels are consumables? Yes, I have a stack of new barrels to rebarrel half my guns in there. But it's like, how often do I want to do that and have a gun be down for a gun that I teach with all the time? Like why when I can accomplish my task and my goals for teaching, and sometimes it makes me a better shooter. Like having to spot wind for a 5.56 is significantly different than having to spot or make wind calls for a 6.5 SOM. If I'm shooting, 77 grain pills at 600 in 18 mile an hour winds, like that's a significantly higher wind call than my 6.5 SOM shooting 140 burgers at, 3,100 feet per second. Like it's just, I'm having to work harder and it hones my individual skills more to shoot the smaller caliber for what I'm doing. Now, if I was trying to put metal to meat versus just metal to metal in a training opportunity, yeah, I'm going to grab, if I'm trying to shoot an elk, then maybe my 300 Norma or my 6.5 SOM comes out because it's a bigger bullet. I want it to travel more efficiently and I want it to kill things when it gets there.
Yeah, he's not shooting back.
Well, I mean, even then, shooting back, it's like, okay, I can go train with a 5.56 gun, but if I know my engagement distance is going to be 600 plus, and it matters in the way of either I needed to take an animal's life or protect myself, whatever, then maybe I do grab my 6.5 Creedmoor AR-10 in that arena. Mm-hmm. Maybe I do grab my 6 ARC. That's not what I'm going to grab to train. And so you have to make those trade-offs. Again, if you're only going to buy one, which is what I get, people ask me all the time, like, oh, I'm a 20-year-old college student. I only have the money to buy one. I'm like, then dude, buy the one that's going to make it so that you get better. It still does what you need it to for the most part. But it affords you the ability to train. Like, because having a really expensive rifle that puts a really expensive bullet really far out, but you can't afford to feed it, is like having a Ferrari you can't put gas in.
This brings me back to what you said a few minutes ago with regard to being afraid to make the mistake, twice, like in making the $600 mistake, 2 times. And the culture around how people are making decisions and everything that you just covered for me, I understand it, but it's also mind-blowing that, all these things that comes to the front. I do not have that depth of knowledge. And I don't believe most people that are entering this space or have been even in the last couple of years obviously have that. You have a lifetime and a whole career's worth of, education and experience underneath you. And had I had what I know now, then I would have made probably some different decisions. But I do pride myself on, like, just because everybody's got the new cool thing doesn't mean I need the cool new thing. I've always been the guy that's like, actually, I don't want what everybody else has. I want something different. But I also understand the value in simplicity and not overdoing things.
I think that's a lesson learned through age, and it doesn't necessarily have to happen in shooting, though. I think because people think that because I have more knowledge now means I always had it. And it's like, no, it's because I've just made a lot of mistakes and learned from them. Good point. Mm-hmm. And so when I was a brand new team guy and I just went through sniper school and all this stuff, like I've always been a gun guy. I've been a gun guy since I was like, 10, 11, 12. My grandfather gave me a service revolver to shoot for the first time. And so when being a SEAL in your early 20s, right after the assault weapons ban had been lifted and it expired in 2004, like all of a sudden I was an adult and I wanted to play with all the fun toys
make decisions,
too.
Yeah.
And I had money that I could spend. And so I did I had a 6.8 SPC, a 5.56. I wanted all the calibers, all the cartridges, I wanted to try all the actions, all the chassis. And I came back to the simplicity, right? That's why most of my bolt guns now are all set up the same way. Like I have AIs and my KMWs. My ARs, like people, and even now I try a lot because people ask me about it, but like I still try to, keep the type of reticles I use very similar. And again, that there is some age and experience of using enough reticles now that I can pick up most mill Christmas tree style reticles and pretty quickly become very relatively proficient with it. Mm-hmm. Whereas some people would take a while to pick up subtension, separation, or, it's just things do it enough times, it becomes faster to pick up. But it's because I've made the mistakes. And I was the guy I thought that those things were going to give me additional capability.
Okay, like, that's a whole other thing. Yeah.
And so it's like I say cliche because I've said it a bunch, but like I always say you can't rent muscle memory. You can't rent reps. You can't go purchase, those things. And they go, well, but a good shooter with and there's two sides of this argument. A good shooter with a regular gun is still going to beat a bad shooter with a good gun. Yeah, but then a good shooter with a good gun will be even better. And so I always try to tell people it's understanding where you are in your journey.
In the curve, yeah.
Because there's a huge learning curve that can happen. It doesn't have to have, like you can do it with a Glock 45.
Yeah, you don't have to have a $2,500 handgun to do this with.
No. And you're going to get those huge gains without, that's the whole, coming back to measuring your finances to how much you want to train versus how much gun you want to buy and how much purchasing equipment limits your ability to train. It's like, well, if you're trying to build a garage gym, it's like not working out until you have everything you'd ever want in your gym.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not going to join the gym or get a personal trainer until I've worked out for a few months on my own.
It's like, how about you just go do some fucking push-ups?
Yeah.
And so it's the guns are the same way, and especially in the precision rifle stuff, is people go watch these PRS shooters and they go, well, I need a $3,000 set of laser rangefinders. I need a $1,700 tripod. I need a $6,000 rifle. I need a $4,000 scope. Like by the time you start adding it all up, $800 Kestrel, like I'm $15,000 in. And I'm like, nah, dog. Like, hey, let's start with a $600 gun with a $1,000 scope, get an app on your phone, buy a rear bag, a bipod, and a sling, feed it some ammo and go shoot.
Go shoot it.
Like, and you're going to be surprised how much you can accomplish. And you are at $2,500 or $3,000 or, in total, and you are shooting and enjoying the hobby. And now you have $10,000 of saved funds to establish your why, figure out what you're trying to accomplish, what journey you want to go on with it, and what use case you have. Like maybe I'm just going to upgrade this one slowly with new chassis or better optics, or maybe this isn't the journey I want to be on and I want to change calibers, platforms. Maybe I really want a gas gun, but you've only made a $3,000 mistake.
I was learning, let's just call it was like an education. It's like paying the tuition.
Yes. To instead of making the $15,000 jump and realizing you're on the wrong journey. And that's the whole thing. It's like, staying on a bad path because you spent a lot of time walking it.
That's dumb.
It's like you have to have a small enough ego to go, fuck man, I fucked up. Like I now get to go back and start again or go down a different path. And I think that's the internet in a nutshell is people trying to justify decisions. And so, you were talking about are the circle of people being small of like who we all hang out. Like I talk to Duffy regularly, Alex at Ridgeline regularly, Fred at Precor, Fred and Mike at Precor, both regularly, all friends of mine, but Mike Pannone and Matt Pranka. Like I talk, all these guys, we talk all the time. And I talk to those guys and what happens is we all do a live, like let's say I'll do a question and answer session. And then Matt does one. And then, Tim Herron does one. And you'll literally see the same question worded the exact same way and asked to all four people. And because they're searching for the answer they want. And so it's like somebody asks me about 6-arc and then the next day, Alex at Ridgeline gets the exact same question. And it's like, or somebody else will text me and be like, I'm pretty sure I had that guy ask me that same question yesterday. And it's because, and a lot of the time it's because they've already either made a purchase or decision and they're just trying to make sure they made the right one. And so, and that's
one thing that might be happening.
When I answer, they get asked more questions and they go, crap, but I've already bought it. So I'm going to go ask him. And then, but the thing is, you ask enough people, especially in this industry, outside of the circles that should be asking you more questions, and you're going to eventually run into somebody who's either works for that company, paid for that company, and you're going to get
something to sell.
You're going to get an advertisement response.
They have something to
and
sell.
You're going to be like, see, I made the right decision because that guy has this high-speed background. He's won all these awards. He's shot this many matches. It's like, yeah, but he also has Beretta across his chest or whatever. Like, and you asked him about if he should shoot a Beretta. Like, what do you think he's going to say?
Really?
And that's because the line to walk within this industry of asking more questions and maybe the people that you work with aren't the best answer for this person asking the question will cost you money.
I've kind of related this. You brought up the fitness thing. For the record, I didn't, you did. So I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to jump on that. I've said this before, like what you're describing in the people's mindset about how they ask questions, trying to get to the answer that they want or to satisfy their belief system.
Yeah.
However that's been cultivated. Same in fitness. And, from the social media perspective, we saw this for 10, 15 years ago. And the fitness industry still lives on like on an Instagram space. But you started to see people were going to all different people to ask all these questions. And we were talking about this earlier, that things got really fucking overcomplicated. And I've described this before, and other people do too. This isn't something I made up, but you need to be moving the bigger rocks first. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Like, you want to lose weight, there's some very basic tenets, that you need to do. Don't worry about the fucking supplements yet. Don't worry about the gym equipment that you need or don't need. Like you said, start with some fucking push-ups, right?
Yeah.
Start with a walk. Like, let's literally walk before we run. Don't worry about the 10K running program if you haven't run in the last 5 years. Like, let's get out there and let's get moving first, and let's do some basic stuff, because you will learn a lot about yourself and about what you do and don't need just by doing that. And so they go, and ultimately the people that were feeding them this fitness information had something to sell. They're, like you said, there's somebody's name is on their t-shirt, or they're using somebody's product or whatever else. And so over time, you saw the consumer start to get a little bit more savvy about this, to the extent now where you don't even have to be in the fitness world, where you can sort of flip through Instagram and you see all the fitness stuff being advertised, or some dude standing there with his shirt off, giving you advice, going, yeah, this doesn't feel right to me. This doesn't seem right. But this hasn't happened yet for me in the firearm space. People are like, you just get in the comments. So what's that, optic you're running on that pistol there? Or what's that? What shoes are you wearing? Like, if this guy's wearing that, then I need that. And he doesn't even have to sell it right now. It's that easy for somebody to make a buying decision based on what somebody else is doing. And it takes these kind of conversations, I think more of these conversations to get there. But going back to that circle, there are people out there that are having these conversations at a very deep level, but they're not giving the answer to the person that's already made up their mind. That person isn't, effectively, the answer that they want to hear isn't coming out of that person's mouth.
Well, the thing is, and it comes down to the exact same response of farming out your safety is farming out your decision-making. And this goes into a big philosophical...
Let's go there.
The big philosophical thing of culture right now, which is, okay, so I don't have the mental fortitude or time or effort to dedicate to taking martial arts, learning how to shoot, buying a gun, defending myself. So I'm going to expect the police to do it, because when they fail or don't do it to my level, I can blame somebody else. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I fail, but I am relying on somebody else, then you're the only person you have to blame.
Yep.
And people come to that realization a lot of the time, and I'm sure Dave talked about this too, but it happens after a traumatic event. So we've talked about your journey of going down this space of where you were and you went, dude, shit. What am I doing?
Oh shit. There's an oh shit moment.
Yeah. And so you don't want that oh shit moment to be after your daughter was raped, or, your wife was assaulted, or you were in a dark alley and you even though you're a big guy, there's 4 of them. And
there's always somebody bigger and badder, man. Yeah.
And so now we go into decision making. It's because you have to, if you allow somebody else to make those decisions, you have somebody else to blame when it doesn't fit your use. And so you don't have to, and you can just claim ignorance and go like, well, I didn't know. I listened to this guy, and he's told me, it was like, yeah, but you didn't even take the time to think if you should be asking those questions of this person.
Or even thinking about it even further, which is like, oh yeah, that is what I should do, and that is who I believe in. So they go all in on this one thing. It's a person, it's a product, it's whatever. And they realize somewhere down the line that, oh shit, you can't walk that back. People say and do things where they end up not being able to walk it back, or feel like they can't, because it will completely ruin them. They can't ever recover from this. So they have to stay on that bad path, as you were bringing up before. But it's frustrating.
It also is understanding that everybody else, even the people you're asking questions of, are also on their own journey. And the good people in the good circles will tell you this, or should. Like, Duffy and I are really good friends and talk a lot. And I went and took one of Duffy's classes, and he at the end was asking me my feedback on his class. Like, and dude, he's a very accomplished shooter. Him and I are like, he'll have me on some drills and I'll have him on some drills, depending on who's shooting what more often. And like, but yet I'll say something, or if I'm going to post something, I'll go call Mike at Precor, or I have a question about training and I'm texting Matt Pranka or Ben Stager or Bruce Gray or my buddy Tim Herron's a GM in Single Stack. Like, if I have a question, like I'm also asking questions of people to also further my journey, because those people know more about than I do, or even if it's just a sanity check, like, hey, has my view on this shifted and I'm off track a little bit? And then we have that conversation. It just doesn't happen on social media.
No, it's tough to recalibrate that compass when you get laser focused on, one particular thing, or you get stuck in that echo chamber. And the social media thing is it gives you what you feed it.
Yeah.
So it's garbage in, garbage out. But at the same time, you can feed it very productive things and get very productive things out if you care to do that. If you're not just into the what's the latest? I don't know. What's the latest drama that's happening out there? Again, going back to the LPBO thing, everybody's going to be like, Vortex going to make a lot of money in the next couple of months. Right? They're going to be your shit's going to be on back order, right? And more power to them. Like, that's, who are they to say? Like, if you want to order this equipment, we're going to send it to you. We're going to build it for 100%. You. But they don't have to be out there doing that. Somebody else is doing that for them. Right?
Well, and we saw that with these cycles repeat, and they'd come back, and it's like, we went down the path of the polymer framed Wonder Pistol, and that 1911s and 2011s were dead. Metal frame guns, DASA guns were dead. Like, you are a FUD for even mentioning their name. How dare you not be shooting a polymer framed Glock, whatever. And then we had the M&P and the 320 and the CZP-10 and all these guns, right? And then dots came in, and then it's like, well, but then those got boring, and everybody had one, and everybody had a Glock with a comp. And so this is a decision being made, or a trend being made, because none of those other guns vanished. The Beretta didn't go anywhere. The 1911 and 2011 didn't go anywhere. They've been here for a long time. But what happens is everybody gets bored, and they have to differentiate themselves. And so to do something different, then we're going to take this old thing, we're going to put a new spin on it, and then convince everybody that it's different.
It's a bright, shiny object.
And then you come back, and it's like, I know people who literally were hanging their hats on saying the 1911 was dead. It was a terrible duty pistol. It was like 2011s will never be, like, it's an old system, yet they're everywhere now. Yeah. Everybody thinks they need one. It didn't go anywhere. Like, and so we come back to this thing. LPVOs, it's like, well, then, Lucas, God bless him, did a video on ACOGs. Mm-hmm. And I put it out on a post once about how an ACOG was a way to give a 18-year-old kid who's went through 6 weeks of training to be in the military,
give him an edge,
a advantage, and the ability to have some holdovers to be as quickly, somewhat lethally capable,
get through the process
in the shortest amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
That is an ACOG, and make it so it can take being beat around an MRAP, falling out of a truck. Again, an 18-year-old inexperienced kid taking care of it and not have it fall off his rifle. That's what it's designed for.
Yeah, and that was the use case.
And so saying that the LPVO is dead and the ACOG is back, the ACOG never went anywhere. If you want a highly robust, super simple, that'll get you close kind of optic, then it might be the one for you. But like, now you're trying to sell me capability. No, it's very limited in its capability, and you gain a lot by going different paths, whether that is to a red dot for CQB or something, or the simplicity going closer, or if you're trying to go farther, you gain a lot in a LPVO than into another optic. Right. But there's trade-offs with everything. But we come back on these trends, and somebody does another YouTube video, and it's like, well, now Garand Thumb or Administrative Results or some of these other guys do all these retro guns, and all of a sudden those become a thing again. It's like, oh, so the carry handle M4 hasn't been around for 25 years.
It's coming back.
Like, oh, so now you're telling me that you have to have it? It's like, come on, man. Or it's like the Unity mount. The Unity mount is the exact height of putting a red dot on a carry handle. It never went anywhere. So it's just because we shifted to other things caused by use cases and stuff. It's like, that's why it comes down to, dude, if you apply your set of requirements, and some of those requirements don't have to be capability-wise. Like, if you like AKs because you grew up shooting a video game or Call of Duty and you always liked AKs and you really want to nerd out on AKs, dude, there's a lot of wars that have been fought with freaking AKs. Dude, more power to your Kalashnikov-loving ass. But that's you have to own that requirement you set, is that you're trying to fill a use with this specific thing. And if you own that, cool. If you try to sell me that it does something different, better, whatever, than what somebody else chooses, then you're just falling prey to the same cycle of justification that everybody else is.
Yeah, this is where it becomes hard to walk back, because once you've gone down that path and you proclaim that AK is the best thing out there, and this is what you can use for everything. It's what I use for everything when things come up. And this is the other, this is a good part, but I think it leads to the confusion in the conversation we're having, which is the amount of innovation that continues to happen. Like, we're always looking for that edge.
Yeah.
So somebody's going to come up with a product to give you or give someone seemingly an edge or some advantage or some cool thing to be distracted by. And again, with what you said is like, the other stuff doesn't go away. We're just throwing more stuff on the pile of things that we have to sift through and make mistakes doing in order to figure it out.
Well, it's like my service rifle journey that I'm doing all these foreign service rifles, and people go like, well, what do you think about the AUG versus the AR or this? I'm like, dude, on logistics, feeding it, like taking care of the gun, for the use of getting a 5.56 size bullet where you want it, an AR-15 is America's rifle. And there's a reason why it's been so widely adopted. Like, a lot of these service rifles were replaced by foreign countries by the AR-15 for its ease of building. You can build it with some simple hand tools. You don't need a welder, a press. Like, dude, they can replace anything on that with a punch, a couple wrenches, like top to bottom. That is the gun. My use case is I got not bored. I still teach with ARs. I'm a nerd, and I wanted to grow some knowledge, and so I started buying other foreign service rifles. I'm not replacing anything.
Yeah, that was your thing. That's for you. So, that doesn't mean what you have isn't good anymore.
No,
right?
It doesn't. None of my purchases make my ARs in the safe
any less
valid.
Capable, or anything. Yeah,
and those are the ones I go and teach with. It's because I wanted to expand some knowledge in a different way. It's like if you were a power lifter and you wanted to be like, hey, I think I might go try to run a marathon. Are you going to be badass with it? No. Are you going to have to suffer through every step of that 25 miles, 24 miles? 100%. But you're just trying it for the sake of knowledge. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
It's just, it doesn't negate the type of training you're doing to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I just go back to the innovation piece, and I think it's great. It's allowing for innovation. There's business. It's capitalism, right? Everybody's kind of trying to do their own thing, and I think there's value in that for the consumer. There's
100%.
obviously, a lot of it, and it's helping with the learning situations. And obviously, it can confuse or cloud things for somebody walking into it now. I know how I felt a few years back, just like, what the fuck? Like, there's so many things to carve through. We were talking about, you don't. $600 handgun, if you're new, is perfectly fine. Or the bolt gun that you were mentioning. Like, no, you don't have to have $15K to get into this, which I think is a barrier. People won't get into it or think they can't be part of it. Because they don't want to show up and look like the noob, on the range or whatever else. I think that's a cultural thing that may be starting to change. People are like, get a Glock. Just start with a Glock.
I agree. I think the culture is shifting, which is good, and I think that's also driving. You were saying building that lens of instructors, I think, is one of those things, because we talked about this last time in the last podcast, of my shift in seeing who the most motivated people were in classes on the range were the people that had to pay their own dime to be there. Mm-hmm. The people who were law enforcement or military, there are some motivated, but they're typically the exception to the rule, not the general overview of that community. And so, but the civilians who are taking time, like we had it in Reno, a guy going like, hey, by the time I be a good husband, be a good dad, run my business, and then try to fit in working out, some jujitsu, dry fire. He goes, dude, I can only make like 2 classes a year. Mm-hmm. Like, so that guy, when he goes, wants to soak up every bit of it. Mm-hmm. And very much wants his decisions to be the ones that better him in a way that he deems fit. I think what's happening, though, is the instructors that have gotten out and expected their past lives to solidify their position are now going and teaching classes where their students are better than them. And you're having people show up to pistol classes, to a performance pistol class, and the students are burning down the instructor. Yeah,
that can be, you could take that a couple of different ways.
And so
you can look at that constructively, or you could
then you
start
start
doing
having
and saying weird shit.
the backtracking, and you go like, well, but that's not tactical. Oh, but that's competition style shooting. That's whatever. And it's like, or man, you stop progressing. Like your development of yourself, you're not on a journey. You're coasting, and it's like, and I think the people that are going to really further this industry with innovation and stuff are the ones who are driving. What are we doing next, and how can we how can we build a better mousetrap?
So I think this is actually a good place to transition to bring something up that just kind of happened recently, maybe a little bit controversial for some people, but it's about the companies that are innovating or have innovated, and some have gotten way out in front, right? Like if we go to like the whole STI staccato thing, go back to the 1911, the 2011 stuff, all the things they're building, and for a long time, it's like, damn, these guys are way out in front of everybody with what they've done with this thing. To the extent it's like, well, what else can they do? But I want to bring up the Mod Lite, emissary thing for a minute, because for some of us sitting back, I might say, well, Mod Lite has a really great product. I have Mod Lights on several of my guns because they perform. They're really great. But people have been saying like, but I don't like the switch, right? So I don't like this about it. I don't like that about it. And other companies like they're listening to that and they're going, well, we can do some stuff. So a company came out and said, well, we'll do it. If that company's not going to sort of listen to the customer feedback, again, that's how they're perceiving this to be heard. We're gonna do that. And now that company has maybe being perceived, that company being Mod Lite being perceived as, look, you guys don't want to innovate. You just want to keep making the same products and charging the same or more than everybody else. And again, you can talk about it in more detail. I sort of missed, I came in on the end of all this. I was busy doing some other stuff. I came in on the end of this conversation and the stuff that happened. Can we cover this real quick and kind of your take on it?
Yeah. That's definitely not something I put myself in the middle of it, honestly. I obviously work with JR, and so I know a lot of the guys at Mod Lite. And I didn't know any of the guys at Emissary, but I work really hard to try to maintain some objectivity, and I am happy to talk about the mistakes that made or stuff that's happened, even with companies that I work with.
Well, that's why I'm asking you.
And so Corey and the guys there asked me if I would, at Mod Lite, asked me if I would be the one to put out some questions and talk to them, because he's like, I can find people that are going to give me softball questions. He didn't want to hear the questions beforehand, like nothing. He was like, hey, let's just get on, do a Q&A on social media, and then we'll go through the questions. And he answered how he was going to answer. And all I was there to do is just ask the questions that people were asking socially online, and get his response. I really tried to not give any feedback other than people were jumping on later in the conversation. And I was like, guys, when you guys watch this, we've already talked about it, not to have to talk about it 3, 4, 5 times.
This is the problem with social media.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like, doing podcasts or long format stuff. Listen to the whole thing. Like taking a little snippet.
I get that all the time.
Can only get so much context. And so anyways, so I did it. I was like, and I had nothing to gain by putting myself in that environment.
Yeah, this goes back to, if you've taken money and you've gone all the way down that path, it's really hard to walk it back if you haven't been objective the entire time.
And so people would ask me, they were like, hey, would you do the same kind of thing with Emissary? I was like, absolutely. Because if you're willing to do one, you got to be willing to do the other.
It's a two-way street.
And I said, and I would do it the same way. Put up a Q&A, give me questions. You're not going to get them beforehand. And I'm going to ask them of you. Mm-hmm. Emissary actually ended up messaging me the next day, was very appreciative of how I handled it. Had a great conversation. And I said, man, we as a species love drama. Social media and the algorithms feed drama. There's people who are literal, trolls are a thing. Look at any YouTube video, look in the comment section.
Yeah, I try to stay out of there.
You're going to find people who are they're trying to find something to dig to get attention. Maybe their dad didn't hug them enough. So that's going to happen. But I said, and you can ask somebody, like 5 people are watching the same event happen. And at the end of that, you get 5 different stories slightly. Mm-hmm. None of them are lying. They could 100% take a lie detector and pass with flying colors. But why is the story different? It's because your perception of events, the feelings, the emotions,
processing of it
is going to alter things slightly. And so I told Emissary and Corey, I said, there's going to be one side of how you view it, the passion you have or the view you have on what's happening, and your worry about your company, your employees, your product,
reputation,
your time, reputation, that nobody else has in their perspective of this event. Like somebody who has, a couple mod lights that have $600 of investment, if it works for you, awesome. Guys who bought pistol lights and weren't happy with the switch, they have that investment in it. But like Emissary's worried about a year of work and stuff they put into it. Mod Light's worried about the fact that they had a new switch coming that basically they knew that their old switch was faulty. They're coming out with a new switch. If they made paddles that put so much leverage on an already failing switch, it was good. Like Emissary wouldn't be getting the call. Mod Light would be getting the call for the broken switches.
These are big boy business things. Yeah.
But it came out publicly and then was not helped with how we respond to drama.
Right.
And that's the whole thing of like, when I try to tell people, is like, I really work to call out trends, not people, because you're going to have fanboys. Like Surefire guys had no buy-in at all in that, or guys who like cloud, which are options. I have both of them.
The same.
Like it's, you don't have any buy-in and you don't have any impact on your life or what you do with the decisions that are being made or this interaction between two companies. And there's processes that aren't the court of public opinion to handle these things. And I've had this conversation with a couple people. Our industry does a lot of stuff on hope and a handshake.
Yep.
Whereas coming from a corporate like project management perspective, dude, if it's not in paper, in a contract, you're carrying that liability. Mm-hmm. And I had projects where I went a little bit farther outside of my what was written to help somebody out that bit me and cost the company money. And I have other projects where somebody did a bunch of stuff and then they tried to get ahead of the project and cut some corners. And I had to go, that's on you, Bubba. Like, we didn't tell you, and it's not written on our contract that you would do that. So you are responsible for meeting this contract and eat that cost. And that's business.
That's business.
That's not like being mean. That's not, and in a corporate project environment, and this was projects as in like building buildings and like construction projects. So like contractors and guys who are doing huge tens of thousands, $20,000, $100,000 hits because you went outside of the contract. And so we in the industry don't have a lot of operating agreements. You don't have a lot of like the companies I work with, like you really do want to get with somebody when you go like, hey, are we going to tie our companies together? Like, hey, I'm going to work and be an ambassador for Iron Sight or for your Red Dot Fitness. Right. Okay, then let's have an operating agreement. These are my expectations as somebody who's repping for you. Here's my expectations as a company you're repping. These are the things I don't want you doing as a rep of mine. And this is the...
I should want to know all these things.
100%. Yeah. That way both parties are clear. Well, this...
As clear as it can be.
Yeah. This working together to develop product that companies A is funding, but company B is trying to help with because it helps them. And there's no NDA, operating agreement, whatever between the two, then creates these situations where when it either doesn't work, where's the cost go? But nothing's on paper.
Yeah, who has skin in the game?
And so it's that situation. I think's a little bit of that. And I'm not going to stop running Mod Light. I'm still friends with everybody there. Yeah. I'm really glad they're coming out with a new switch for the pistols because that's one of the things that I didn't necessarily like about them too. Which is why I still have like 20 freaking Surefire X300s. But and that gets into subjective things of
again, use case.
Well, and here's the deal. At the end of the day, the court of public opinion is vote with your money. Like, and that's the thing of like decisions, right? Dude, somebody else doesn't have to buy what you want to buy to justify your decision. And because another company doesn't make exactly what you want.
Doesn't make it a bad company.
Doesn't make it a bad company or the product's bad because they're listening to somebody else's wants and making what they want.
There's a whole population of people out there.
Don't buy it, man.
Right.
Like, and that's the thing. Like, and I think social media drives this where everybody wants to be relevant, and relevance is driven by
the popularity contest.
Doing what's popular. And if you're not doing what's popular, then you have to shit talk what's popular.
Or be very controversial about it.
To justify why it's not what you're doing. And sometimes you just go like, but I prefer this.
Yeah.
People ask me about budget optics all the time. I'll steal this real quick. The budget optic question. And just to go back kind of on our other topics. And, well, why don't you run primary arms? Have you tried this new startup company that, has 5 to 25s for $500? And I go, hey, I found what I like. I've made those decisions multiple times in the past. Like, I have the ability and budget to own things that I don't have to try the lower end optics. For me, in optics in particular, it's just the most glaring example. Guns are upgradable. I can buy a Tikka for $600 and then rebarrel it, put a new bolt in it, put a new chassis on it slowly. Optics, you can't go inside of an optic and make it better.
Change it, right.
You have to sell it and buy another one. So I would rather somebody start with, if part of the platform is upgradable, you start with, hey, the receiver on a Tikka is a really good receiver, and there's a lot of things you can upgrade on it. That's great. So I can start for $600, and then as I get more money, spend to get a chassis and whatever, but I can still shoot this. I can't do that to the optic. But if you buy a cheap optic and it breaks, now you have to go through the process of selling and buying and
your guns down. Yeah, all those things.
I tend to then stick with a certain level of optic, and I don't really go beneath it. And I don't have the time, or like with everything else that I try to try out and shoot and learn, and my being a dad and a husband and everything else, I don't have unending time either to go down all these endeavors myself. And so within my journey, that's one thing that I go, I'm just not going to try to shoot. Like Aaron Cohen does all the red dot stuff, Sage Dynamics. So Aaron does, his thing is pistol red dots. And so he has this white paper he tries to try every pistol red dot there is for a certain number of rounds, and it's very certain testing criteria.
Those are his criteria.
And so that people can see how things are doing. That's his niche. Optics and scopes could become its own thing in and of itself that literally takes up the entirety of my time. And I wouldn't be able to go shoot USPSA, go shoot pistols, go shoot carbines, go enjoy because I enjoy that stuff too. And I would literally be doing, tall tracking tests and, parallax adjustment tests and all these things for optics every single day and turn it into a job. It's not interesting to me. So.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the consumer being confused by where do I start with this and how far do I have to get into this? And this guy seems like he's saying all the right things and my friends seem to agree with him, so I'm going to do it this way, and then be rocked with something like, well, now this other guy who seems to be getting a bunch of attention because maybe something controversially put out there, or maybe something really cerebral and objective that he's putting out there is making me question all this stuff. And these factions get created, and going back to the having agreements, business agreements and making big boy decisions, there's a bunch of, I think the decision-making process, particularly in this industry, is very juvenile a lot of times. It's just not a mature way of thinking. You're doing it based on popularity. And it's not helpful that you can see a post and take the guy's word for it and then click off of that, and 5 seconds later have it in your shopping cart, spend the money, and now you've made the $600 decision, right? Which then you're faced with later, maybe the wrong decision, and that's when the questions start coming into the DMs about, should I do this or not? And
you add into this, you have the consumer, you have the subject matter expert, you have companies, you have instructors, and not even separating those two things from each other, but like there's these different factions, right? And then within social media, then you have the drama. We love drama, right? You have meme accounts. And so you have accounts that are faceless accounts that are, I think they serve a purpose. They act as bumpers. They say things that other people don't want to say.
Right. It's like the Family Guy show or whatever, like that. They say a lot of shit on that show that you could not get away with if you were an actor or a producer putting that together. You would be fried. Like that's the way I look at it. I look at it, that's what this is. That's what the meme is.
And then you have it shared. And again, as a consumer, sharing that stuff is different. But then there's the lines are blurred between, and I'm the same way because my company is me with, the assistance of JR sometimes and whatever. So it's like, the Bruiser page is me. It's me all the time. It's me. And so the lines are blurred of like stuff I find funny. And I'm okay with that because I only have to worry about me.
Yep.
But if, Daniel Defense starts sharing a bunch of shit talking memes, that now affects how many employees, distributors, et cetera. And then you have companies that do that. And so you have this, there's names out there, Mark LaRue or some of the other guys who then choose to
go down that path.
Be very vocal on their company page and create these very juvenile interactions with consumers, with other companies.
Which normalizes it to a certain extent.
Yes. And you, dude, the HK social media girl was a thing for a while. And was very, it was a thing that they were, shit talking and condescending on Twitter and all these things, about being HK snobs and whatever. It's like, and then it becomes, because we love drama and it's different and it's perpetuated. But it perpetuates those juvenile interactions between companies, which then creates the buddy working environment, which then creates when things go wrong, or if and when they go wrong, they go in a very juvenile, they go wrong in a juvenile way.
Very fast.
And so it's hard to step back from that. And that's important in who you associate with. It's important in who you market with. It's like and that also leads to the influencers, the people that companies choose to be the face of getting their product out there. It's like, well, there's these professional people who shoot really well, who put out a professional message, but that doesn't get the same likes as the chick wearing black multicam pants that's shooting a 50 cal with a video pointed at her ass.
I have that conversation with people all the time. Like I'll listen to, like you mentioned Chris, like I love Chris. Mm-hmm. His videos, right, or his posts are not going to get 2 million likes.
No.
They're just not. But for me, I listen to everything from start to finish because there's a lot of value in it for me. And he continues to put it out there, and I continue to listen to it. I love it. That's just one example. There's a lot of guys. I send guys messages like, I realize this won't get 2 million. I take time out to let guys like him know, like, I got a ton out of this. Like, I hadn't thought of it this way. This gives me a little bit different perspective, things to think about. Thank you for putting that out. I realize this might not get 2 million views, whatever, 2 million likes. I guess I'm doing that in a way, to say thank you, like to give back because this person took time out of their day to put it out there. But also, I guess acknowledging, like, please keep doing it. Like, keep doing it because what is the thing I saw the other day? Blowing up, somebody shooting freaking tank rounds through a gelatin human body to show what it does. Like, that's going to get 2 million views. It's interesting to look at, but how much value does that provide for me? None. But how many more of those are we going to see now? We'll probably see over the next month. Somebody's going to go, well, we got to start putting tank rounds through.
What would you rather watch? A John Wick or a movie that's, entertainment value, or a documentary on, the way that your processed foods are made?
Yeah, I totally get it.
Like, and so for some people, like the Social Dilemma, if you haven't watched that, fucking watch it.
Yeah.
On Netflix, talking about social media as a whole and the spirals it creates, got really popular and was really popular to watch. And some of those documentaries do get popular, but then, somebody was talking about like the difference between I saw a meme once just talking about the differences, and it was, hey, if you think women like dad bods, 50 Shades of Grey made this much in the box office, and then somebody else went, but just so we're clear, like 50 Shades of Grey made this much, but Shrek made this much. And it was like 8 times as much.
Right.
And so it's just, some things are entertainment value, and they're always going to be. And, hot sex sells, man. It will continue to sex sells. But it's, what are you trying to sell? And when we're talking about things in a defensive world, in industries that
there's consequence, man.
Yes. And it's like, well, I found a hotter chick to put with my cheaper gun, thus I'm going to sell 10 times more of them. Like, that has consequence, and I think is subjects and things that should be talked about openly in the industry, that may or may not be. And again, vote with your dollar.
Yeah,
like, are you buying a gun because some chick has it strapped across her tits, or are you buying a gun because it's been tested well, it runs well, it does what you want it to, it shoots well suppressed, it shoots a round that's does the things that you want it to do? Like, there's a lot of questions there. Or are you going like, oh shit, it's black multicam and over a couple nipples, like, purchase.
Yeah, go to the shopping cart.
So, and if that's what you want to do, man, like, and you have a gun wall that you want to cover in fancy looking stuff.
It's America. Do whatever you want.
100%.
Yeah, do whatever you want. I just, when I'm looking out there and I see this stuff, like, it frustrates me, and maybe I'm just being an old man about it or whatever. It to me, a lot of times it's just ridiculous, and it frustrates me. But I see the drama being perpetuated, right? And I see that again as new people coming in. They don't hear these conversations. Like, if they don't listen to this podcast, they're not going to get this conversation on social media, because it isn't going to get 2 million likes, and so that's not going to get fed into the algorithm, and it's not going to get spit up on their feed somewhere. They're just not going to see it.
My page, if I go drag a couple guns out, we're sitting on the porch where all those gun pictures are taken. Mm-hmm. If I go like, oh shit, I got to throw something up today, I'll grab a couple sexy guns, lay them on my porch, take a picture, put it up. Those pictures get 2,000 likes.
And questions, and what's this, and why did you decide that, and all that.
Or I can go and do, a whiteboard on the math behind shooting movers, and it's like, 800 views or 300 views and 60 likes. But nobody, maybe it's, my AIs are sexier than listening to me talk about the math behind converting, miles an hour to inches per second. Like, and that's just how it ends up happening. But the what is beneficial to you in the moment is any of the pictures of me dragging my 2011s out and throwing them on a rock, take a picture. Does that benefit anybody? No. Is it sexy to look at because somebody wants to buy one? Sure. Like, but I like Matt Pranka does a really good job. Ben, a lot of guys do a lot more of like dry fire videos and that kind of stuff. And the guys and girls who find value in that, I think, associate with it. But if you look, again, the slow-mo of a torso getting blown up by a tank,
right,
versus somebody talking through putting the eyes before the gun in dry fire, that's going to be two very different levels of reach.
Yeah, and look, I'm not an idiot. Like, I get what social media is. It's entertainment, right? But it could be used. It can be, and we're talking about it. It can be used much differently. For me, like, I'm always looking for, and part of this journey is looking for the value. Like, what is the value that's being provided here, and what advice can you give somebody that's very frustrated with the process right now of putting out a new product or because there's a lot of good people out there, and they really believe they're doing the right thing, and they're really
100%.
But they feel like they're failing miserably.
Oh, I think, and you and I have talked about this. It's feeding the algorithm, and I have a great example. So, looking at everybody who's a guy who's in this industry, if you watch like the random feed in Instagram, the page you open, it's just like
Explorer page or whatever.
What Instagram wants to give you. Eventually it starts to feed you pop culture shit. And so the number of like chicks TikTok dancing and whatever just grows. Like this Marvel movies, cats. Videos. If you go and you tell them, no, I'm not interested. No, I'm not interested. No, I'm not interested. Because I was like, dude, there's nothing there that's on my business page, the pages that I like, the posts that I interact with, of the pages that I like, why am I getting any of this? Like, the algorithm
because I'm not clicking on it.
Sense.
Yeah, I'm not clicking on it. Or I clicked on maybe one of these things at one point.
Yeah, and so
now
all of a
it's
sudden,
everything.
Or it's listening to you, when you talk. That's a whole different thing.
A lot of things, yeah.
And so it's but if you go and you go, I'm not interested. I did that. I was like, I want to see if this works. And so I started unliking. You just hold on it, go down, not interested, with like all of the Hollywood bullshit, the pictures of chicks, TikTok dancing or whatever, or whatever. That I just went for like 5 or 10 minutes, like 2 or 3 times over like 2 days, and the algorithm adjusted, and all of a sudden knives and guns and bushcraft and backpacking started popping up, and I was like, oh shit! And so it became less and less and less until there was like none of that stuff anymore. And then now, when I go to that page randomly, I'll see one pop up. If I tell it no, like, don't start giving me that again, it doesn't come back.
It works.
But it's the algorithm. And so I think as we feed social media, if you are going and liking all this clickbait marketed bullshit, that dude, does Sig Sauer really need you to like their post about the new 320? Does it give them anything? No.
They don't need that.
So if you like that, though, that feeds your algorithm to give you more of just the very shallow content. But if you go through and you like Matt Pranka's video and Mike Pinone's video on dry fire, and you like, guys shooting USPSA, and JJ Ricazza talking through something, and Rob Latham, and your algorithm is going to true itself, and you're going to see more of that stuff, which then gives you more value out of social media.
That takes work.
It does.
It takes a conscious effort. It also goes back to the asking yourself the right questions. Like what am I trying to get out of this? What's my need? If you want to be entertained and you want to see the dancing chicks on TikTok videos, that's really easy to find. Like, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But it goes back to asking the right questions. Like, who do I want to hear? What do I want to see? So we were talking about like sharing the story again, how I came across you. I didn't know much about you. I'd seen you pop up, but I talked to another guy in the circle. Went down to Miami, visited with Chris Curris down there at Condition One Group, and we were talking. I was like, look, man, these are the kind of conversations, both online and offline, that I was having with him that I want to have more of. And I know there's more guys out there. I know you work with these guys, and you guys are like brothers from different mothers, kind of.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
The way you guys handle yourself. Maybe Chris wouldn't want me saying that, or maybe you don't either, but that's the way I look at it. And so he brought you up, and so I was like, okay, so let me go find out who this dude is. And what I saw was, again, I'll share the story again. It was a pie chart on a grease board, sitting in your gun room. Wasn't highly produced. There weren't chicks with black multicam covering their nipples or anything like that. And I sat through the whole thing, right? And I listened to the whole thing. I'm like, this is the kind of stuff that I want to hear. This is the type of stuff that makes sense to me. But that, I don't know how many views that thing got, or that Instagram. But
that one actually went fairly viral.
It did. It did okay. So going back to the people that are getting frustrated, they're trying really hard to put out valuable content, or they really want they don't want to fall. Maybe they realize it or they don't realize it, that they're falling victim to the head turn video with the full auto slow-mo, video and things like that.
It takes a lot of.
What's the advice? Like, what can you tell them in your own journey and how you've done it to this point? Because it's not going to get you 100,000 followers.
No, and that's a really hard thing for some people to take, especially if you think that your bio entitles you to it.
But can you share the successes that you have had that people aren't going to see on Instagram?
You have to establish what you're trying to get out of the industry.
Yeah.
And so I started. And this started like when I started writing, I was like in my first platoon, and I was just a gun guy, and I like shooting. And so I went, hey, I want to write articles. And I connected through friends of mine with the guys at Recoil and stuff. I said, I want to write articles. And I asked NSW, the JAG there, you have to fill out a form that asks for outside employment, and they have to approve it. And he goes, oh, so you want to write? And at the time, the books had started, being a thing, and they were worried. And I was like, what are you going to write about?
Tridents are on everything.
And I was like, I want to write gun reviews and stuff. And they're like, well, why would people listen to read it if you don't say you're a SEAL? Like, you can't say you're in DOD. I said, that's fine. They're like, well, why? I said, because I train and I shoot competitions and I enjoy doing that stuff. And I just want to write about why I like guns, or the history of the AUG, or, just
whatever
stupid stuff. And so I did. And so I got in this industry, and I was teaching a little bit on my off time and helping buddies out, but I wasn't putting my bio out there either. But this whole time when I was active for like 14 years, I was in the industry, but without my bio. And so I got to be in this really interesting place where it was a running joke on like the forums at the time that I was a barista, because people would go like, hey, you don't know who you're talking to online. You don't know where they came from or their background.
Yeah.
So people would disregard when I'd be like, back then it was like, hey, well, the Knight's Armament, this or this. And they'd be like, well, that's because you're too poor, this and that. And guys are like, dude, I know Joe's just a barista, but you got to think about, you don't know who you're talking to. And so fast forward, when I finally did retire and come into the industry full time, I had got to watch a lot of guys make a lot of mistakes of trying to hang their hat on things, or watch them go into the industry, not get what they felt they were either entitled to, or fall prey to the, like, this makes me feel good now. Like, or this being drama filled makes me relevant now.
So hold on, they were trying to get into this without hanging on their resume and saying that up front, like you should listen to me because of this. But they weren't getting
the
result that the guy that put his resume out there front on the cover of the book or whatever.
Then they start letting it slip. And then it becomes easier. It's like telling lies, right? Like once you tell a lie once, like it becomes easier to tell a lie. And
especially if you get friggin' 20 million views off of it.
And the more you lie, then it just becomes that's your whole personality. And so I think the backsliding, and we're all doing it every single day. And I'm not perfect, and I'm still trying to figure it out myself. But the being on social media is something where it's a dopamine hit, and it's a dopamine hit liking things, and it's a dopamine hit getting likes. And so watching what posts get interaction can cause people, if you're trying to play the algorithm, to
it's like relationships.
It's marketing. Well, but the thing is, there's marketing for growth, but is it the growth you want? It's marketing to sell a product, but is it the product you want to sell? Is it like, hey, can I throw my name on a Glock and throw some fancy red camo on it and sell 1,000 of them? Or do I want to do something different that I feel is worthwhile that's not already in the industry? Mm-hmm. Can I do something, the brand or the personality that I put out there, is it when you and I sit here, when the cameras turn off, am I still the same person when we stop shivering on my porch? Mm-hmm. Like,
it's cold out here, bro.
I've been watching.
Even the turkeys out there, if you guys can hear that, like they think it's cold.
And so it's, and I was blessed. I truly do feel blessed that I couldn't use my bio at all because it made it really easy to not do it now. And I had to be okay with the slow growth because to follow and to be held to the standard my community set, I couldn't start slinging the trident out there and slapping people with it to get the growth. And so when I got out and I could use it,
you recognized all these guys that had made the mistakes.
But what had happened is I had, when I got out, I think my Instagram was Bruiser Industries at the time, but I think I had like 2,500 followers or something. And, but I had it for a while. I've been writing for a long time. I've been in this industry since the Magpul DVDs. And it's like, and so but the people that I had, the 2,500 that I had were people that held my opinion in high regard, that really cared about what I had to say, like were very interactive. And then you watch people with like 600,000 followers or whatever, or 300,000 followers, but their posts would get as many likes or comments as some of mine would. And I had like 2,500, 3,500. Mm-hmm. And then you start getting the right people to share them and the interaction gets higher and higher. And so even though like for me now, it's affirmed the path that I'm on and the way I want to conduct business, because when I do a Q&A, even though I have, 26,000 now or something, which isn't something to scoff at, I guess, in this industry.
It's not.
When I do Q&As, Instagram shuts me down with how many people, and I can do them every other day, it's going to max out because the number of people that I have interact with the page, which is humbling. And like I said, I try to answer every one. I try to answer every DM. And if I miss them, guys, hit me back up. I try, but it's just me. And I do that because that person is making a decision and people go like, well, you answer the same questions all the time. And I go, but it's not asked by the same person. Mm-hmm. And so this new person has chosen me to ask this question of, and if I think I have value in this industry, then I should answer that in a way that is like this person is the first time I've answered it and not be frustrated, which sometimes is better.
I'm sure it's tough to do sometimes.
It's easier than others.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like teaching a class, right? And I had instructors that I had to battle this with. It's like, you're answering the same question on day 1, week 1 of sniper school that you answered last time and the time before that, but it's a different student.
It's a different group of people.
And so you have a new person coming in who's trying to learn how to bench press. You've answered this question on, angles or where to grab the bar 1,000 times. At time 347, if you start being like, motherfucker, like Jesus Christ, when you answer it, dude, that person's going to be like, fuck, this guy's kind of a dick.
Yep.
Dude, we're coaches, we're instructors. Our students their method of interaction with us is through social media. Like you have to treat, and it can be monotonous and hard. But
you're choosing this.
You're choosing it. And those are your students. Those are your clients. Those are your customers. And you are the product and your information is the product. And you have to try to make it so that person gets the best version that you have to give them every time.
It's a long road.
Yes, 100%.
It's a long road. It's something you have to stay committed to, going back to fitness and whatever else. And occasionally I think it's okay to drop in there the resume, where you came from and who you are, because people can easily miss that because of all the distraction, all the other things that are out there. I think one of the things that I get too is the staying objective. If it's not in you to be objective, then trying to make up objectivity, people are going to see it and smell it on you, really quickly. But what I also get is that now people are reaching out to you for bigger things like manufacturers or, like companies, like Modlite as an example, like, hey man, you're the objective dude. You are the guy who knows going to ask me. Yes, we know one another, but I also know you're not going to throw me a softball. You're going to hit me between the eyes with what I may not want to hear, but need to hear. So it is reaching people. And I guess I look at that as like being successful, that people don't just come to me because they know I'm going to give them the answer that they want. Because you don't have anything to sell.
Well, I think social media skews this in our relationships too, which is, what is the test of a true friend? A true friend doesn't tell you what you want to hear. He tells you what you need to hear. And sometimes friendships are destroyed because of it, because somebody's going down the wrong path and you have to be like, yo, like,
it's reality.
Scott, man, you might want to readjust your life priorities. Like your wife's going to divorce you. You're like, we're talking real stuff. Okay. In this industry, in guns, purchases, whatever, like people don't, and that's what social media has done. We're like, well, hey, if my spouse is telling me that like, hey, you have some pretty unhealthy habits, but I can post those habits on social media and I can have 6,000 people love and comment and tell me that I'm beautiful. And then, dude, relationships are destroyed.
Yep.
Because they place more value on the shallow people than the valuable ones. Now, transition that into the industry, and you can find 1,000 people to tell you that you're making the right decision, your purchase is right because they made the same decision, or they have something to gain by it, or they don't have an answer either. And sometimes the person who's telling you that, hey man, you might not have made the right decision, might not be your flavor, and then they unfollow you. And people don't want to be unfollowed. So they want to give the answers that makes everybody happy and not the answer that they necessarily need. And so companies now, and who you associate with, IWI, Steyr, whoever, SIG. I'm not going to bring SIG into this. There's 100 people, 1,000 people that you could pay a paycheck to tell you how amazing you are.
Yep.
And I have the companies that have aligned with me at this point know my style. And I go, here's the deal. Your product has to stand on its own. If I'm on NDA, you're going to get my feedback, but you're getting my 100% blunt feedback. If that means I don't get to keep it, so be it, because I want to run what's decent, not what somebody gave me. And that's kind of the part of like being new to this industry, and like you kind of got to put the time in and the money in to maintain your opinion. Otherwise, it is purchased and has a huge asterisk next to it. And so if you got out and you were never a gun guy and you just went to the first company who gave you 5 rifles, dude, how are you going to review anything?
You're a sellout.
And so it costs me, or guys like Steve Fisher or whatever, like it costs us money to maintain some of that objectivity because I don't get a paycheck from anybody. Yeah,
when you say it costs you money, it means you're putting in time, that's sweat equity without a return on investment.
Nope.
Yeah.
And so
There's no
do people give me guns to shoot? Yes. And that's another question. Guys go, well, you got a free gun. I said, but it doesn't give me an added capability. When I already have a safe full of rifles
you don't need
that I
more
paid
guns.
for, what does another bolt action rifle in 308 give me the ability to do? Nothing. And now I have to spend time, ammo, resources to then give that opinion and product time and testing without a paycheck or return on investment. So if I do get a rifle out of it, that's the only payment I got on. And if I am doing my job properly, a $3,000 AR, right? Okay, that's $3,000 that I put $1,000 or $1,500 in ammo through.
Right. What's that value of all of that? Yeah.
I spent 16 hours on the range to shoot 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 rounds on, and to give them, and then I might have sent it back or gave them feedback and wrote out my notes or my white paper.
That's hours and time you can't get back.
That is then for that feedback that I give that company. And so the companies, and I talk to people I talk to now who are marketing directors, production managers, whatever, they go, we don't need to be told we're awesome. We need people to break our shit and then tell us what broke or why you don't like it so that we can fix it. And you don't get that from an influencer. You don't get that from the guy who opens his safe to pull a gun out with his iPhone like this because it's black multicam or whatever. You get that from the guy who has a truck bed full of ammo cans and the gun's going to look scratched and beat and ran hard. That's the guy that we want to, because it's worth the $1,400 production cost or $1,000 production cost to give that guy a free gun if he's going to go put 8,000 rounds in 3 days or 10 days of time on that and tell us, hey, I broke this, the gas is leaking through here, the gas rings went out after this, the bolt carrier is doing this, my ejection pattern was sporadic, I tried it on this suppressor, it didn't work, at this suppressor it did, like, hey, the ergonomics of this are kind of funky, like, have you guys thought about this? And they go, oh shit, now they can change and adjust.
Or not.
Based off of that feedback. And so, but it does. It takes money to be at a point where you have to be okay with companies getting pissed at you, because they will from time to time, and don't not like your feedback and go like, hey man, put that gun back in the mail. Fine. Absolutely.
It's in the mail. Yeah.
Awesome. Like, I'm going to carry on. And because the stuff that I have in my safe, I want there. Otherwise I wouldn't be shooting it. Like, and I do get sent stuff to try and whatever. And if I tell people this, I go, here's the deal, man. For my opinion, I said, if I see value in either a student using it as a loaner gun or something, because I only have limited space. You saw how fucking safe how full that sucker is. I can't just keep adding stuff.
Right. So you have to make choices.
Otherwise it'll sit in the back of the safe and it'll never get shot. And so I have to see a value for me in it, either on a student using it, like you used one of my guns or two of my guns, or that it tracks well and does something I want it to do, then I'll keep it. If not, I'm going to send it back to you anyways, because I also don't feel right then that's just a personal thing, turning around and selling it when I didn't put the output of money for it. And so, cool, I've built my opinion up. I'm putting it back in the box. I'll send it back to you. I appreciate it. And I just think that's the way you should conduct business.
Yeah. So that, to me, that's a measure of success. Well, you've got people that are reaching out to you for this opinion. And what you've done, I think, in the end of all this is what you're saying is, if you're playing in the social media world and you're playing in this business, it costs money to maintain your integrity sometimes.
100%.
And that's a reality, and it's not something you can walk back on if you fuck that up.
No, not to use I'll save that analogy for more for courses, but I'll just say you put an asterisk next to your name,
mm-hmm.
and I think people in the industry need to assign or ask themselves what they're looking to get. Because if you are looking to just make a bunch of money, then coming out with your sling, your new belt, your new holster hanger, all these things just so you can put your name on something that's already done, so you can sell to all of your fanboys, will make you money. 100%. Like, you coming out with if I came out with a Bruiser Glock people ask me about, I have stuff that, like, my Bruiser AR-15 with Lone Star, the Bruiser P210 I did with Bruce, they go, why'd you do those things? And I said, okay, my AR-15, I like Bartlein barrels. They're the barrels that I run in all of my bolt actions. I said, if I'm going to do an AR-15 that everybody's already done, I want it to be different. And I'm going to put the best, most accurate barrel that I know of in an AR. And that's something different. It's not going to be for everybody. It's going to be ridiculously expensive. But it's going to be something that I don't think the market is giving it hasn't been done 1,000 times before. It's not just another AR with my logo on the side of it. The P210, that was a project that I wanted one. And so Bruce was like, well, if I'm making one, let's figure out how to make a bunch of them. And I was going to pay Bruce to build me a one,
right,
full custom. And it turned into a project of 50. Because now I'm doing a 2011 with Infinity, and they're just going to make it as you can order a set of specs off. But didn't want to just I like staccato. Staccatos run great. I don't need to change a staccato. Like, if you want to go buy a staccato, it's great. And I don't need it to be a staccato that's Cerakoted tan with a Bruiser logo on it, because it's not different. It's all I did was throw a logo on it.
Yeah.
And so, and I like seeing my logo on things that are for me.
Who doesn't?
Like I would go Cerakote a staccato and put my logo on it, and I would shoot it at classes.
There's a cool factor there.
But like, if I'm going to put my name on something, my niche, I guess you could say, is I'm trying to do things that are different, that other people haven't done, with companies that make the best thing I can think of. Like my buddy Rob Smith owns Resco watches, and I was like, hey man, would you be willing to do a Bruiser watch with me? And he uses Swiss Movement, really nice watches. He's a great guy, makes super high end stuff, a craftsman, loves what he does. And he was like, yeah, we'll do some watches. And why? Because I like Rob, and he makes really nice stuff, and
you've got a reputation, he trusts you,
and so we're going to do some. But do I have a Bruiser sling? No, because there's slings made that already do what I want them to do. Do I have a Bruiser Glock? No, because agency or whoever already makes stuff that does exactly what I want them to make. I have a bunch of agency guns. I don't need them to have, to be in some special color and have a Bruiser logo on them. If I'm going to do something, I want it to be slightly different. Otherwise, why am I doing it? It's just to be different, not to do something that I don't think the industry is already offering. So it's and again, and people want to do it because they want to support you. They want to, support your company.
Well, this also goes back to, that you were making the comparison against the guy that's got 100,000 followers and does a post and gets the same amount of likes as you get, or, comments, or whatever unit of measurement we're using here, to you who had 5,000, followers at that time. I think that's important for people to understand that you can do, and this got taught to me a long time ago, and I'm not awesome with social media. I have I'm challenged by it, and I have a love-hate with it, but I also understand it's something that I have to do, right? And so if you're gonna do it, like, there's things to do well, and I've made tons of mistakes, and I'll continue to make them. But somebody told me once, they're like, look, man, you got these people out there, this is on the fitness side of the house, like, you got people out there with 100,000 followers. If you had 10,000 followers, you could do it. And these were true followers. And I have a buddy of mine, his name's Mike Salemi, who's done really great things in this kind of a way. He was very specific about who he chose to partner with, and how, and the information that he put out and whatever. And the one thing that I learned from him is, like, in the 10,000 followers that he did have, 9,000 of those people engage everything that he puts out. Like, and if he puts out a fitness product, whether it's a program or whatever, they buy that product.
But they trust in it.
That's why.
Yeah.
That is why. And so again, you can do a lot of damage, from like a financial perspective in a good way with a lot less if you maintain these things. But every time you slip, right? And once you have that asterisk, if you're okay having an asterisk next to your name, that's fine, whatever. But every time you put another one there, or every time you slip, you risk taking another follower, taking that trust away for that person in that number that you do have.
They don't have to trust in you being 100% infallible.
Yeah, you don't have to be right all the time.
They have to trust in your intent.
That's exactly where I was going with this. And that, okay, so Joe did this. He's also talked about how he's changed his mind, or he said this thing, and I used to say this. Maybe it's not you specifically, but I used to say this, and now I think this, and I'll say this, and here's why. And they'll give their why behind whatever it happens to be. That's the integrity. The intent was there at the beginning. It was always there at the beginning. And over time, I've learned some different things, or some things came up. And as a result, my intent is to walk back a little bit and say, like, I may have been wrong about this, and here's why, but I haven't changed who I am or how I'm representing myself.
Well, and this comes into a good point, which is, my wife brought it up when I was trying to take a very staunch line on some things, or at least the way I wanted to conduct myself on social media. And she goes, don't you worry that, or I was putting out information, she goes, don't you worry that people are going to copy you. Like, and I go,
playing it too close to the chest.
And I was like, well, and now that you've known me, we've talked quite a bit now. I very much, through all other life experiences and stuff have come to the point in my life where I'm like, I'm going to be me 100% of the time, for better or for worse, and realize that I will try to be better than I was yesterday in today. And, but that I've made my mistakes, and I will make more in the future, like you said. And, but I have to own those. And I don't want anybody putting me up on some pedestal that I'm some infallible creature. I think if you do that genuinely, and you genuinely believe that, and you come across that way and you live that way, that cannot be replicated by somebody who is not genuine. So it will, and like you said, it might work for a little bit.
Until it doesn't.
Because you're not being yourself. And I'm not above people changing, or because we all do at times. And we all have those moments that change us and put us on a different path, psychologically, lifestyle-wise, job-wise, knowledge-based, learning, anything. But if you are faking one of those transitions, then it's like telling a lie. You have to work really hard to maintain the lie. And eventually will catch up with you. And so I just try to, and that was one of the best compliments I got from the Reno class, was somebody went like, hey, I had an expectation of your course and who you were. You are exactly who you were online. Like, and your course exceeded my expectations. Like, and I went, that's where I want to be. That's what I want to be in this industry. I want to be where it's like, and they were even made the comment of like, hey, some companies, the person you got online wasn't the person who showed up to the class.
I've been there several times.
And you're like, but hold on, like this person that is the face of this company, I went to that class in Texas, but it was a whole different person with a whole different style. But and I'm buying that style. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, you're buying the company. And there's, not to get into 100 different names of companies that are built that way. But again, the person who started that company, the face of the company, the person who's putting it out, their why is different than mine. My why is the people who see me on social media, who hear me talk, or how I explain something. The person they're getting in the class, they're getting it. The person and the style you're getting in the class is what you saw online.
It's consistent,
and that's why I try to be try to be as close to who I am as I can, because that way you're not surprised. And if the information I put out and the way I explain things resonates with you, you're not getting a different product when you actually pay me. Like that's a free sample. You know what I mean? Like you're not showing up and all of a sudden like, oh, that picture of the cheeseburger for Carl's Jr. looks amazing. And you show up and it's a, McDonald's cheeseburger and it's like this fucking big. It's like, you're like, what the fuck? Like the marketing photo looked fantastic.
The bait and switch.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to be the same flawed, loudmouth, obnoxious person online. So that way when you show up, you're not surprised, for better or for worse.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. So there's a couple things that go along with that. One, you have to be okay with you. Mm-hmm. You have to be okay with being, not perfect, being infallible, talking about your mistakes, not being afraid to talk about your successes either. I think it's important to be able to do that and be humble, because again, we've talked about that lens. It's a two-way street. Maintaining that for a long period of time gets really, really tough, as you mentioned, if there's asterisks in there or there's lies that you have to continue to expound upon or build on. You brought up the Reno class, and there were several comments, and there were things that got told to you probably publicly, and then there were a lot, and then there were things that happened in conversations that happened during and then even after with some of those guys that I was in there with, because that's the thing that came up the most, is like, this is the same dude, number one. But also everybody was like, I also get, because they've talked to their friends outside of, in the industry or follow or whatever. They're like, yeah, that dude's just not my style. You also have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
You have to be okay with people not liking you. And yeah, you're going to get the trolls, but there's trolls that are looking for attention, and there's people like, dude, this dude's just not my style. And that's okay. And I think for the consumer and for the person that's also delivering the information, whatever it happens to be, that is a normal part of this process, and it doesn't need to turn into this dramatic shit talking that goes on out there. Just be okay with that and fucking hit the unfollow button. It's really that simple.
Or
otherwise, you're not contributing anything of value. And I think that's the thing, is like, what am I contributing? What's the value that I'm actually contributing?
Social media is free. Like, you can unfollow or don't go to my website and register for a class. It's that easy. You have to go out of your way to then be pissed off that you got who you saw online. Like, and that's the thing of like those circles, right? Like I teach pistol and carbine too, but so does Duffy. Duffy teaches a great course. Paul Van Dunk works for Agency Arms, teaches a great course. Ben Stager, Matt Pranka, Mike Pannone, like JJ Ricasa,
right?
All teach pistol. Nick the Velox teaches pistol. Like Chris teaches pistol. Like cool, man. And I tell people, don't drink from one fountain because all of us have learned a different set of lessons and have a different, and it doesn't make the lessons that I learned, what I did, less valid or another SEAL or a combat controller or a competition shooter or a cop. If they're just different and it modifies how we put out information. And I think the instructors that try to invalidate other instructors are
telling.
Are the worst of all of them.
Very telling.
And so because you haven't experienced their experiences, and but like if I'm not your style, that's the whole thing. I call it the miracle on 34th Street, and I do it for products too. Like in that movie, kid sits on Santa's lap, asks him for a toy, and he goes, "Yeah, you're gonna get that." And the mom runs over and goes like, "But have you seen how much those cost?" And he goes, "Yeah, but if you go to this other store, you can use this coupon, and it saves you 50% off." And she goes up to the manager
of the store where Santa's at,
and she's like, Your Santa's sending people elsewhere. And he's like, "I'm gonna go fix that." And she goes, "Any store that puts the customer above the bottom line gets my business." And he goes, "Oh, like if I'm not your style, that's great. But I want to push you to other places that I think are valuable that might be your style." Like again, dude, for precision rifle, scope carbine and stuff, dude, Phil Vallejo is a super talented shooter with Modern Sniper. Alex at Ridgeline's fantastic. Him and I talk regularly. Mike and Fred at Pracor are awesome. And there's a bunch of other dudes at K&M Shooting Complex and Altus and KMW. Terry Cross down in Louisiana is a super talented law enforcement sniper instructor. There's lots of other guys out there you can go see. And it might be more convenient.
Yeah, you're in the Pacific Northwest. That, if I live in Florida, where can I go?
And so guys go like, "Well, when are you coming to Maine?" I go, "Dude, Ridgeline is right down the road, man. Go see them. And then take one of my classes later. You're probably going to pick up some different things from both of our classes. But it doesn't negate my experience or ability as an instructor that you go see somebody else. Like the people who are college professors and have to publish, go do other workshops with other professors and leaders in that field. Doctors work with other doctors who are learning other things and have different lessons learned.
That's how things get advanced.
And so if you just go like, "No, fuck everybody else because my way is the only way," dude, you've stopped. Like, dude, put your diplomas on the wall, put your, graduation, hang up that beret, that trident, that badge, tell old war stories, and just fade into the darkness, man, because you're not bettering anybody. And you're doing this for you, not your customer. And that's another why. What are you trying to get out of this? Are you trying to get out of this that the customer leaves thinking that they got their money's worth? Or are you trying to do this so that you got money
purely for your own personal,
and your ego was fed by the end of the course? And so that's why I the way I explain stuff in classes and like how far and stuff we shoot. I said, I don't have to tell you can do that. All I have to do is give you the opportunity to. And you'll prove it to yourself.
You'll figure it out.
And then I don't have to go like, "Yeah, we shoot this far with this gun and this far, and I shot this." All I have to do is put you on the range with enough information and guide you along to accomplish your goal. Mm-hmm. And then you can piece it together however you want.
Yeah.
And
humans are intelligent that way.
And for some people that may resonate, and some people want to, be gifted or be told or get told war stories or, live in this, why do we
fantasy world?
Why do we go to dude ranches? Why do we go play cowboy? Why do we
camps?
Because it's, and you know what? We live in America. And if that's why do we play golf? Think about it. Shooting is a something that has practical application in defensive life, liberty, all these things. Like, what does golf do for you? Dude, it's enjoyment, man. And
for some guys, it's so they can get away from the wife and kids because they don't want to be there.
And if you want to go dress up and act like you're a tier 1 operator on the weekends,
go fucking do it.
Fucking have at it.
Yeah.
That's not my personal style. There's lots of people who that is. And
Yeah, I think there's a deeper underlying thing here, and golf is a great analogy of that, or example of this, in that there's a greater responsibility when you're out there instructing people. You mentioned before, why are people doing this? Are they going out there because they want to LARP and they want to run around and pretend? Cool, then go to those classes. And if you're the instructor that's doing that, understand that that's what those people are there to take, and be in touch with that, because there's a greater responsibility on a lot of other levels that people are doing this. Going back to the guy that can only get out and train 2 times a year, he's there for very specific reasons. And you should understand that, as a coach or as an instructor, that you have, and you should feel that. That goes back to the integrity in your fabric. I do think there should be some sense of morality. People can disagree with me. This is business, man. At the end of the day, there's no morality in business. I fucking disagree. I disagree with that wholeheartedly, but just understand that you have a greater sense of responsibility. We're talking about life and death type shit. And so when you start crossing that line into the, well, I'll just say this or I'll do this because it makes me money, that's dangerous. That's dangerous territory.
Well, and here's the why.
And I think there's guys out there like you that are talking about that pretty publicly. Like, stop it. Like, you're training people to do things that could potentially get them killed.
But is it training and knowledge, or is it an experience?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. And so, like, if we're LARPing, let's call it LARPing.
And that's the differentiation. There are people in the industry who offer experiences, and there's people in the
Nothing
industry
wrong with
who offer knowledge. And so, like, you can go to a theme park, or you can, and get driven around a track on a cart, right? Or you can go buy a Mazda Miata and learn how to autocross and become a better driver and feel those G-forces, whatever. You can jump out of an airplane with somebody strapped to your back and experience it, but you don't know how to fly. You don't know how to, you don't know how to skydive, because that takes time and effort. And so you're buying an experience versus you're buying knowledge and training.
I've been to both.
I can fly in a plane, or I can fly a plane. Both are moving through the air, and you're doing the same thing. So it's, what are you trying to get out of the shooting industry? And neither of them are wrong.
Nope.
It's just understanding what you're trying to accomplish. And
be able to articulate it.
And differentiate between the people who are offering you those things being sold as the same product. So are you getting sold a flight or flight lessons? And that's the easiest way I can describe it.
That I think it's perfect, because it makes perfect sense. Not everybody's going to get this. And you have to make those mistakes, and you have to do those things, and maybe you have to get made fun of, and people have trolls hit your page or whatever for you to finally realize this. But at some point, just be upfront with what you're doing. And again, the consumer needs to understand, if you're making a buying decision, why are you making that buying decision, and what are you really going to get out of it?
I mean, and we see that now with there's Tactical Officers Association events that have officers go and they get a lot of experience, and then we have the civilian side of it, like these range days that pop up, and people are trying to make it so that people have a learning experience and opportunity to train around people and better
meet
themselves.
People, rub elbows, yeah.
And then there's some that are social media events.
Yep.
And so there are people that are going to one expecting it to be a co-learning workshop and basically get a photo shoot for influencers, end up very disenfranchised because they're being sold as the same thing, but the product they bought is very different.
Yeah, that ultimately comes out in the end, and it has. And there's those experiences and those events, they've been called out, and they'll continue to get called out. But is it a flight or is it flight lessons? Or what are you doing there? Let's talk about the lessons and maybe kind of change the direction here a little bit and just talk about what Bruiser's doing. When I first sat down with you in January, this was a new endeavor for you, right? It's still probably pretty new, right? But getting out there, and you've been doing it for a while, but now it's like, no, we're going all in on this.
Yeah.
And you went all in on yourself, which I think is important when you do this, is there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of liability that comes with that. And we talked about the financial piece and whatever else, but you're out there, you're teaching classes, and you're also continuing to put yourself out there. The most recent one I went to was 4 days. For some people, it's very hard to get 4 days.
Yeah.
A way to do it. There's, again, all the same things. There's logistics, there's expense, and whatever else. I feel fortunate to have been there, but we lost half the group for the second 2 days for whatever the reasons were. And it's probably a combination of all of the things. And we picked up another half dozen guys, and these were law enforcement guys that would not have been out there for that experience, for what we went through and what we got. There was an experience there. I think part of what you're delivering is an experience. And that's being around you and, getting that. I always like that part of it, but I also go to learn, right? And I know why I'm going is because I'm making an investment to learn and understand this better. Sometimes there's cool shit, like you learn things or you do things you wouldn't be able to do normally because there's equipment that's afforded to you, or
or range availability.
Yeah, range availability, all that kind of stuff. But these guys came in and you did that on your own dime. You didn't have to do that. You gave. It cost you money. It cost you money, literally and figuratively, to do this. And I guess where the question comes in is, like, as you're building this and as you're seeing those things happen, what is Bruiser doing this year? How is it building on what you're learning so far? What are you seeing? What adjustments will you make? Have you made? Or is it too soon to tell right now? You just have to continue to do the thing.
I am a person who thrives off feedback, and sorting through it is something that I've definitely gotten better at, I think, over the years. In my younger days, especially in the community that I came from, you're going to get a lot of feedback, and your reputation is everything. And so you want to do everything you can, but if you're constantly trying to fix other people's perceptions of you, you never get to focus on the real stuff. And so you take it as everything has a basis in reality, but then how can I adjust within the path that I want to go on? What they're saying, some of it might be, okay, that's fine. You would have liked to go this way, but that's not the direction I want to go. Mm-hmm. Like some people might go to my scope carbine class and want more up close and personal, 50 yards and in. I'm like, well, then that's not the direction I want to go with my curriculum.
That's not what you're teaching.
But I think word of mouth is the greatest form of marketing, and we talked about this with your gym and stuff too. It's that's where you're going to get people who somebody goes, they're not getting me on social media. They're not getting, my highlight reel, so to speak, which that's all social media is. They get their friend who they trust, their opinion, who can answer questions on their experiences within your class. And so getting classes out there in a first year of business, it's hard because you either have to sell people in one way or another and get them in the seats. But I want people there who are coming for the right reasons and not just because I had a bird on my chest for over a decade and a half, and that's what they're coming for, because I don't think those are the type of students I necessarily want, and they're not there for the right reasons. And so it's playing that thing of being okay with having half-filled classes. Mm-hmm. For now, and letting that when I come through next time, that person hopefully will have had a good time, and that's who I'm going to focus on and giving them the best I can. So I'm not spending the entire day making content. I'm not on my phone. I'm not, because I'm interacting with the person who paid me to be there. Mm-hmm. So that person, when I come back the next year, has 5 buddies who he's like, dude, you need to go to this course. Yep. Like, it was badass.
Yep.
And so when I had some gaps and stuff, I'd love to be able to do it all the time and make that a business model. But it's like, dude, at the end of the day, like, we have to pay the bills too.
Yeah, well, it's a business.
And and for the guys who don't know, like, I went to Reno and slept on somebody's floor to make it so that I could run that second class without too much additional expense and offer those free spots so that I could grow that word of mouth there. And, get some law enforcement guys there that, had never heard of me before. Mm-hmm. They got connected to me through Buck at Staccato. And I was like, hey guys, if you guys want some extra training, come on out. It's on me. And they had a great time. And one of the guys was like, hey, I already called my old SWAT team. Like, They're going to reaching out. Like, thanks for having us. That was awesome. Like, am I going to be able to give, to run 5-person classes forever? No. I'm eating a 401k to do this. Yeah. And it's drying up way faster than I want it to. And so, but people are trusting in me. And if that's 4 guys, and as long as I can make enough money throughout the year that I finish in the black and can run all the classes, my goal for this year is to not cancel a single class. if that's 5 freaking people, and I literally make $100 to travel to New Mexico to teach a class after all my expenses are paid, then I want to run that class. Because if those 5 people, hopefully the next year will be 15 or will be, but if I don't reach those people in that area and that word of mouth doesn't start to happen, then I have to try to get them through social media again. And I think word of mouth from trusted friends is the best type of marketing you can get.
Yeah.
And circles like law enforcement aren't as big as people think they are.
No, they're not.
And so, a SWAT team in Reno knows some guys with the surrounding agencies. They go to a tactical officers association and they go, dude, like you should bring Joe in. Like that's what I would hope would happen. But like your review, you did that review and for those guys who listen to Scott's review of the course, him and I talked afterwards. He goes, dude, what do you think? I said, dude, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think of the course. Like, I want you to be as honest with the review of the course publicly as you can. And you said things like, hey, if this is what you're looking for, this might not be the course for you.
Right.
Like, and I'm not going to go online and be like, well, Scott said this might not be your course. No, everybody should come. Maybe not.
No, I learned that in my own business. Like, and all I can do is do what we do as best as we possibly can and take care of everybody and make sure we give them all the touches that we could possibly give them in the right kind of way, knowing that we might not be the right fit for them or that the expense is not what they want to pay. I know what that value is. I've decided what that value is. And, for people out there that are starting their own business, we're talking about this. Like there were times where we had half classes, I'm paying an instructor or I'm there. I'm not getting paid, like I'm in the red for 3 years, trying to come to make the black, from the investment that I made to expand the business when we expanded it or whatever. Being okay at the end of the day as an instructor going, this person, I know I delivered the value to them. They did all the things everybody else did, but for whatever reason, they're not going to come back. They feel like they got everything that they needed, or it's just like, I can only do one a year. Right. And next year I want to take a pistol class with this other guy that you recommended that I take, that Joe recommended that I take. That's gotta be, you have to be okay with that. I see guys making mistakes where they're trying to expand their businesses and they're discounting things and they think they're doing it in a way that's going to grow their business, but what they're doing, it almost looks like desperation. Well, and I know what that feels like, man. I mean, we went through COVID as a gym and, you're coming out the other side. I'm still one of the most expensive games in town, right? I get that. And people are like, well, if you just did this and you lowered your prices, you did that, then we wouldn't be able to deliver what it is that we are committed to delivering. And then everything that we say we're doing, we're not doing it. We can't do it. So you either have to make a fundamental shift or change in what it is that you're doing. And you have to be okay doing that, which I'm not. And accept all the downstream consequences that come along.
And that's a huge thing in this industry. Talking about new instructors is, I think a lot of guys view being public about not having every class be sold out. Yeah. Dude, I started my business full time 6 months ago. And I'm teaching and growing a shooting community here in Oregon. There isn't one. And I've talked to guys who are like, dude, if you go to classes that come through Oregon, there's probably 50 people in the state that make up 85% of every class.
Of the revenue that gets generated in a class.
Yeah. And so if you want to grow that, you got to get out there. Mm-hmm. And then those people have to drive that for you. And so it's coming across and some people might go well, Joe isn't selling out classes. That means his classes must suck. It's dude, you have to be realistic as an instructor to understand you have to start someplace. It's dude, when you start a fitness journey, you don't have a 6-pack. It's going to take you a little bit, and that's okay. And it's well, but you were a SEAL, but that's not what I'm selling you. I'm not giving you a Trident at the end of the class.
Yeah.
And so, and be okay with that being your product and that growth. And I think people get really nervous. And going back to the associations part, I watch a lot of guys be really scared to build their own brand because that's really hard and lonely when you're starting.
It's fucking lonely. It's sacrifice, man, and you might not be very popular in your social groups because you're spending more time on your business. It's tough on the family. There's travel, there's finance, there's sacrifice and compromise that have to be made.
Well, and that's the thing with like me. It's like, dude, I'm married. I got 4 teenagers between the two of us, and dude, I love my wife, and I love being here. Like she always says, like, sometimes I think you want to be on the road more than you want to be home. And it's like, no, but the roads where I make money right now, I very much enjoy being home.
Right.
Like, and because I was in the SEAL teams where we were gone 80% of every year for 14 years. You know how many things I missed of like Valentine's days, kids' birthdays, Christmases, because I was deployed? Like, now I'm in the opportunity where I get to set my own schedule, how often I'm on the road. Nobody else is setting it. It's what quality of life do I want to live between when I'm teaching. I love teaching. But how much I teach also then dictates how often I see my wife, how often, like, spend time with my kids, like the friends I have that I haven't been able to see in a while, how often I shoot competitions, things that I think then also make me a better instructor. But I think people get not complacent, they get impatient, and they try to associate with people who are perceived as more popular than them, and they don't do their due diligence on if that brand is something that they
stand on its own.
No, that there's people who are very popular who you couldn't pay me to associate with. Like, it's a podcast thing, right?
Wouldn't put them out if they were on fire.
I wasn't beating on your door to get me on a podcast.
No.
Because and the thing is because I've made this very public. I want no part of BroVet podcasts because it's what the association then I think taints my brand and more than it assists with who I want to reach. And I think people go like, well, that person has 8 million people that listen to his podcast or whatever. But it's that you can't wash the taste out of your mouth after there's no amount of toothpaste that can wash that regret out of your mouth once you associate with certain companies. And just because somebody has 300,000 followers, I don't want to teach a class with you. I don't want to do a range day with you. I don't care that you, like, a lot of guys do. They go like, well, I'm going to go to this state range day or this state, whatever. It's like, I very much am concerned with the other instructors who are being at the events that I'm at, because you are going to get through osmosis some of that reputation in your association.
Yep.
It's like, when you're in high school, if you associate with certain friends, you're in that crew, right? And so the circle that you surround yourself with very much matters. And people go like, well, this person sells out classes, that brand sells out classes, without thinking about if they're the type of classes they want to be associated with. And I've watched a lot of companies, guys like Dave Acosta, who chose to work for other companies and then realized after the fact that brand wasn't something that they wanted to necessarily be associated with, and then has to be a big enough person to then rewrite their own brand after the fact.
And that takes a lot of work, and it's lonely.
It takes a lot of ego to admit that you associated with somebody off of very shallow reasons, like simple follower counts and stuff, that and you chose poorly.
Yeah, it's an easy trap. I think that's an important thing for people to hear, man, for the consumer to hear, for the people that don't get that or don't understand that, because they have a job somewhere else, and they're just paying. I have some money, I have some discretionary money. I can go train. And why does this guy cost $600 and this guy costs
for 4 hours versus
this guy costs $200, or this guy costs $1,000? Like, what's really going on?
Well, it's like perceived value. That's a marketing. Yeah. That's a marketing ploy in and of itself.
Yeah.
But it's and again, some people want to simply go and listen to a guy tell war stories and talk about how amazing they are, or stand in front of certain color banners with.
But there's a lot of memes
symbols.
about that. Yep.
And there's people who are lining up for that experience so that they can stand in the aura of certain individuals. At the end of the day, man, dude, I've made my mistakes. I've pissed people off. I've had to get sat down by friends of mine who I hold in high regard when I've, opened my mouth and insert foot or was on the wrong path, and had to humble myself to take that criticism and feedback. And I'm sure in my life it'll happen again. And, but I want to just associate with good people who want to be better. And that's like at classes, I try my best to kind of breed and foster that environment where it's a co-learning experience, because I'm learning just as much as the students are, either in how I can get across to a different student. Like, this as a coach, you can explain it to 100 people in a row the same way, and everybody's light bulb goes off. And then you have that one student that you can't repeat it over and over and over again, expecting them to pick it up. You have to try to go out a different path. And I have students like that regularly that I'm like, they're not that they're stupid. They just learn differently. And then when you find that new way, that's now a new tool for your toolbox. And
you have to be committed to finding those tools, though.
Or you find,
which means you have to be committed to every student in your class.
Or you find a question you've never been asked before.
You have to be seeking that.
You go, that's a good fucking question.
That comes with the feedback.
Yeah.
Like in asking those questions, not just making assumptions.
But dude, at the end, I think progress in any endeavor takes long, hard, sustained effort. And when you plateau, you will stop to see progress. That is in making money. That is, talk to Elon Musk about, how he made his, Jeff Bezos. Like, you downplay the fact that those guys are still hustling and still working 60-hour weeks, because when you stop, the company stops growing. Your knowledge base takes, and maintenance of experience and knowledge takes sustainment. Your skill sets take sustainment. Your ability to teach takes teaching and sustainment. And without the dutiful and dedicated pursuit of these tasks, you will stop to progress, and you will slide backwards. And fitness is just the easiest thing. You stop being active, your body will start to ache. You will start to put on weight. Your metabolism will slow down. Right. The brain and everything else works the same way.
It's not wrong. It's a very natural part of the process.
And pursuing bad endeavors, like smoking too much or drinking too much, or cheating on your dry fire, or and
gaming the drills or whatever,
will cause you to backslide. And it becomes that much harder to then take a deep swallow and make an adjustment to your lifestyle. I mean, this is just, we're happy to be holding this example. I get caught in where, I'm not shooting as much. It's raining outside, whatever. My knee's been hurting. I haven't jumped on the treadmill in a week. And so instead of working out daily, I go a week or two where I'm smoking a cigar every other day, right, and drinking a little too much brown water.
We're replacing that behavior with something else.
And then you get back on the treadmill the next time, and you're like, and you've backslid, and that is okay. And I think people have to be okay with failing every once in a while. And failure is viewed as like a death sentence. Failure just means that you didn't succeed in what you were trying to accomplish. And so if that is reaching a student, like, you're not going to reach everybody. If that is having positive reviews, you're not going to get it every time.
Right.
If that is feeling at your hitting a PR every time you get on a bench press, it's not going to happen. And the more times you fail in those endeavors, the failure becomes easy. No, failure should teach you something. Failure isn't a negative. It should just make you adjust course to try to not repeat that failure every time. If you're plateauing on an exercise, find a new way to work out, right, to break through that plateau. If you are plateauing in your shooting endeavor, shake things up. Find a new way. If you're teaching, go learn something else. Go to a different source of information. Try to disprove yourself, or think of things in a different way. If you fail at that, then maybe it solidifies the way you were doing things. Or maybe you learn something else, or it gives you a new perspective on the way you were, and you can slightly alter course and continue to improve.
Yeah, that's the grind.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the grind. And setting unrealistic expectations, or using somebody else's why to set that expectation. Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster in the end.
Oh, I mean, shooting is one of those things where it's like, you're not competing against the person next to you, you're competing against yourself, because they're not hitting the gun out of your hands. It's like pushing the weight. It's like, you can only push as much as you can push. The more you let somebody else, the person bench pressing more weight than you next to you, you're going to lose focus on the task you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it's a simple fact.
And so yes, there's competitive nature, and yes, you are, when you're running a race, how many times do you hear this in physical endeavors? You go, you have to run your own race. Mm-hmm. If you fight your own fight.
Yeah, comparison is an evil bitch.
if you're trying to fight somebody else's fight, you're not going to end up in the same spot you wanted to end up in.
You'll end up somewhere.
And so in your quest for knowledge or improvement or whatever, you kind of got to fight your own fight. Yeah. And I think that's, people have a really hard time identifying that and then staying on that path when it's really easy to pick somebody else's plan.
I think that's the point to end on, because that's when I sat down here and I said I got some unfinished business. These are things that I picked up, and I was like, this is a conversation that needs to be had. And I know people listen to this and they'll be like, I didn't like everything you had to say, but he's not wrong, about stuff. And not that you're trying to be right, but this level of conversation is why I came out here, and this is the kinds of conversations I want to continue to have. And the more guys that I get around that are doing what you're doing in the way that you're doing it, it's somewhat validating for me that it exists, because I knew it did. It was just, it's a little tougher to find. So you have to dig a little bit, and the whole podcast and the way this thing came together was like my journey in digging to find, the information and sit down and have the conversations with people, preferably not when my toes are frozen and my hands are frozen. But I think it's a great place to wrap it up, man. So, but before we do that, it's bruiserindustries.com and it's at Bruiser Industries on Instagram.
Yep.
Couple classes coming up. You just put it out there. I mean, first off, your website's awesome in terms of giving information. You're very articulate. You write well. We've already established that. You already established yourself there. So when people go there, they can get all this information. But stuff that's coming up that you're excited about,
I mean, just hit on the website. Just, a lot of people don't realize I really went out of my way to put a lot of the stuff that I'd written previously under the media section on the website. And I also try to go out of my way to share all the podcasts you and I have done, all the podcasts we've done in the past, YouTube videos I've been on are all under the media tab. I also have all the printable targets and stuff you guys can use for whatever you want is up there. Download them. I literally have a Harvard study on gun control on there. So if you guys want to go argue with your aunt at Thanksgiving,
that's a whole other conversation.
More power to you. I got classes coming up this year. I've got Texas in a couple of weeks, a sold out class in Pennsylvania. I've got New Mexico, Utah in St. George, Washington's coming up. And then hopefully over the next couple of months, I'm going to be putting on the 2024 classes. We're going back to Reno, back to Southern California. I'm lining up some Southern California and Arizona classes that'll be on the website soon. Just because it's not on there yet doesn't mean it's not coming. And like I said, I really try to respond to all Instagram DMs. If you guys really need to get a hold of me, dude, info@bruiserindustries.com. Emails are way easier to track than DMs. I literally get 60 to 100 DMs a day. If I just go like, oh, I can't answer that right now, and I try to come back to it, I'll never find your DM again. So
it's hard.
Email me. There's a contact form on the website too if you want to go that route. Contact me that way. It's easier for me to follow in my emails, and I will get back to you. And I'm just going to try to continue to do the things that I can. And if it resonates with people, then hopefully it resonates well enough that I can make a living doing it.
Right on, man. I appreciate you having me out here and hosting this here on your porch. In this kind of an environment, I don't get to do this very often. For those people listening, it's maybe hopefully the sound quality is all good, or you never know. Like, I don't have my boy Eli here babysitting me today, so we're gonna put this thing out. It should be up pretty soon. So check out Bruiser Industries. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Oh yeah.